Okay. Hey guys, welcome to day 3 of what's supposed to be the Rush trial. It seems to be something else besides a trial, though. Not much really happening today in terms of witnesses being heard. If yesterday was all about distract, then I think today was about something else. Chaos. There wasn't really a single witness that was really heard in front of the jury today. So, you kind of get the idea that the whole trial is being slowed down to a crawl. And I must say, I've just watched Alec Baldwin. Let's just have a look at him. Alec Baldwin arrive in court with Hilaria. That they both look pretty chipper. What do you guys reckon? Do you think the trial's going quite well for him, in the sense that the trial's not really underway? The defense have the initiative. The defense have basically throttled this trial down so that it's not actually even proceeding. So well done. I mean, it's one way to get your client off a charge is don't let the case actually be heard. So that's kind of where we are. So I must say I'm really glad that I didn't cover this court day earlier, because there's not really been much going on. Lots of posturing. And the posturing isn't over. The next witness will only be heard on Monday. So the jury is not actually present for this, right? As far as I know. Hey, Chelsea, good to see you as well. You could have a dismissal. Yeah, you could have a dismissal. I don't think there'll be a plea deal. Some people are saying there's no sound. There should be sound, but let me try again. Is there sound now?
Sir, do you know a gentleman by the name of Thel Reed?
I do.
How do you know him?
I met Thale approximately 12 years ago, possibly even 12 to 14. He was opposite.
How do you know him? I don't need the history.
He's a work friend.
How long have you known him?
Of him, 12 to 14 years, and more like friends, approximately 5 to 7.
Okay. And do you know a gentleman by the name of Troy Teskey?
I do.
How do you know him?
He is a friend of Thales, and we used to spend time together at his house or meeting at restaurants and things in Bullhead City.
And
So I just want to say that it is brilliant luck for the defense that someone came along after the trial and said, I think this round is important or whatever. And so basically the defense is saying, wow, this changes everything. We need the case dismissed because of this. 3 years after the fact, someone came forward and this is really what they're talking about.
just for the
Good
record,
luck
what does
for the
Thel Reed
defense.
do
Really
for a
good luck.
living?
Thale Reed is a bit of a legend, gun coach and armor to the film industry for going on 60 years.
And does he have a daughter?
He does.
Who is his daughter?
Hannah Gutierrez Reed.
And do you know her?
I do.
Have you met her?
I have.
Mr. Kenney, can you explain, were you ever asked to do any training for the set of the television series 1883?
Not training myself, no. But props, firearms, leather holsters, dummy rounds, blanks.
Those were items that you were providing to the set of 1883
Correct.
as a prop house. You own a
Yes.
prop house.
Yes, and that's specific to the set.
So if you know, was Mr. Reed asked to do anything relating to 1883?
He was actually hired to be a gun coach. And
So just to give you a little bit of an idea what this is about, it's a little bit like that YouTuber in Moscow, Idaho, who after everything thought he found a glove at the trash can, and then he handed that in. And it's a little bit like that. And then someone coming later and saying, that is crucial evidence in this case. What did you do with that evidence? And maybe someone said, well, it actually looks like it's totally irrelevant. And then someone says, yeah, but you buried that evidence, and so we need the case dismissed. It's totally improper, right? Well, it's very good for Brian Koberg in a situation like that, if that is what happened, right? Just giving you an analogy. And so suddenly there's this incredible intrigue regarding this. And of course, it takes everything completely away from Alec Baldwin and the church. The focus is now on the prosecutors, on protocols, on police corruption, on improper procedure, and it's now the protocols of the police that are on trial. Clever.
and a bit of
What does a gun coach do?
Well, gun coach-
we don't do this for a living.
yeah. Gun coach would teach the actors that aren't familiar with things like the 1873 lever action period weapons how to operate them smoothly and consistent with the character as called out by the script.
So did you and Mr. Reed go to Texas for any reason for 1883?
Yeah, we did all of our filming when we were involved with the project physically, personally, was done in Texas.
Were you asked to do a cowboy training camp?
We were asked, Thale and I were asked to be there.
To do what?
And Thale was charged with training of the actors. I was charged with bringing, specific to the training camp, some of the live
Are you familiar
reload
with how-
ammunition that Thale had.
And why was live reload ammunition being taken to Texas?
Well, it was just for actor training to give them a sense of the recoil of the guns, and it was done on a private range away from set.
Were you present when the actors were shooting the live rounds?
I was.
And was Mr. Reed there with you?
He was, for the most part, he was in the Sprinter van with the AC running because it was August.
Now, what I find interesting with this, and this is my understanding, is armorers are gun enthusiasts par excellence, right? Armorers are gun fanatics. They know everything about blanks and live rounds and this and that, and it's their passion, right? Another thing that armorers do, and as far as I know, Thal Reed did it, although I say that under correction, armorers like firing, like at firing ranges. And so one of the things they do, instead of buying live rounds, they build live rounds. In other words, they will get gun casings and they'll actually self-manufacture, like at home or wherever in their workshops, they will make live rounds out of dummy rounds, but for like their own personal use, right? And you can actually see that is exactly how you can get the live and the dummy rounds mixed up through this extramural activity, right? And as far as I'm concerned, that would be a plausible scenario. Hannah doing that, which is what a lot of armorers do, and that's how live rounds now get mixed up with dummies. And yeah, but now they taking the whole thing elsewhere. They seem to be blaming Seth Kenney, who wasn't even on the set. He's not even part of the set. Anyway.
Texas summer day.
So did you take live rounds from, did you take live rounds to the cowboy training camp?
Yes, yes.
You don't know anything about my business. Where did those live, who provided those live rounds? Did you provide them? Did Thel provide them?
Thel provided the live rounds, and we met in Albuquerque. And at that point, he loaded up his luggage and everything he needed for a couple of months.
When you say you met in Albuquerque, how did he get to Albuquerque?
He and Hannah, his daughter, drove out together. We met in Albuquerque, prepped her out for the Nick Cage movie.
And just for the record, where did they drive from?
They both drove from Bullhead City, Arizona.
Oh, thank you. So they came to Albuquerque, and did they have the live ammunition with them?
They did.
And where did you all go from there?
She loaded up and left to Livingston, Montana to work the Nick Cage movie. And Thale and I loaded up the Sprinter with everything we needed, and we headed straight to Texas.
And did you take that live ammunition with you to Texas?
We did.
And did the actors get to have their training camp?
They did.
And was there any ammunition left over?
There was.
Where did it go?
It stayed in Texas for an undetermined amount of time. I could never figure out when it came back to my shop.
With who? When you say it stayed in Texas, did it sit by itself?
It was with the prop master for the day of the show up at the shooting range, up at the firing line. And from there, it came back into the Sprinter van, my Sprinter van. And then at one point or another, it made it back into the hotel room. And I lost track of it once it was in the hotel room. And from there, when it got loaded back into the Sprinter van and came back to Albuquerque.
So, but it doesn't come back to Albuquerque by itself. So tell us how it gets from the cowboy training camp to Albuquerque.
Well, it's driven back.
By who?
By myself.
Okay. So, and how is it packaged? What kind of a container is it in?
All the live ammunition from the cowboy training camp was in a typical household grade bin, approximately 2 feet long, 16 inches tall, about the same width. And it stayed in there and was packaged within each caliber individually within smaller boxes that typically held about 50 rounds.
Do you have any idea approximately how many rounds were taken to Texas?
Yeah, I know exactly. It was 325 rounds.
How do you know exactly?
Well, it was a guess of Thales that there was between 200 and 300, and they were loosely combined in a small military green ammo can. And when I opened up that bin in Texas at the firing range for the first time, I had brought along 10 boxes, white plain boxes with styrofoam inserts that held 50 rounds each. So I populated those boxes, and then it took a picture of those boxes. And one of the boxes is dog-eared, means it's partial, and coincidentally, it held exactly 25 rounds.
In case I missed it, how many rounds came back to New Mexico?
between 50 and 100.
And when they came back to New Mexico, where did they go?
They went, because I was running low on space, they went into the bathroom.
Were they in the green can?
No. Once they had been populated into the small white boxes, the green ammo can went to the firing line, and it was being used for the spent shells, for the spent cases of fired brass.
So how were they kept at PDQ?
They were kept in that same gray bin, large household typical gray bin, and within the same boxes that they had populated or gotten populated into at the Texas firing line.
So I'm going to show you what has been previously entered into evidence as Defendant's Exhibit A21. Do you recognize that?
I do.
What is that?
That is that gray typical household bin marked live ammo 1883.
Sir, I want to be clear with you. After this came back to Albuquerque and was at PDQ Props, did you then become involved in providing props and ammunition to the set of Rust?
Can you ask that again, please?
Did you provide props and ammunition to the set of the movie Rust?
I did.
Was that after you brought these back from Texas?
I do not know. I do not know when this bin came back to Albuquerque from Texas.
You drove it back yourself?
I did, but I did a few trips.
You don't remember the day that you brought it back?
Correct.
Okay.
It could have been before the shooting, could have been after the shooting.
Understood.
So someone says, what is this all for? Well, it's a motions hearing, and it's a motion to dismiss the case. And if you watched earlier and you saw the tension with the judge cutting off the prosecutor, feels like the case is extremely close to being dismissed.
In terms of boxes of dummy rounds, how many boxes of dummy rounds did you provide to the set of Rust?
A single box of 50 45 Colt dummy rounds. That was the single box. The rest of them were of different calibers and were not contained in similar boxes.
So you provided one box of dummy rounds.
That's correct.
Where did you get this?
Those came off the set, off the prop truck of 1883.
And did you inventory them or do anything with them before you provided them to the set of Rust?
Yeah, so yes, there was, I essentially grabbed a double grocery bag and dummies because I knew they were running short, or I'd heard that they were running short on set. And I thought, well, just in case, I'll grab some extra for them. And so from that plastic bag the following morning, because again, I had to sleep in the van because there was hundreds of thousands of dollars of weapons and it's Albuquerque. So I slept in the van armed, and the next morning brought that bag and brought them into the office and took a look at them. They were unusual in that they had been antiqued. They were one of a couple of thousand that had been antiqued en masse, and they were so corroded they didn't look right at all. So I sat there, and each one took about a minute to polish before it had an appropriate patina. And I also noted that a few of them had a muddy rattle to them, and I just attributed to whatever liquid chemical agent that they had soaked the rounds in had infiltrated the interior of the case. And again.
So just a quick reminder, the title of this video is Will Hannah Testify? Do you think that was on the cards today? Hannah testify? And who do you think that would be very bad for if she did testify? If Hannah did say, I had this experience with Alec when I went into the church, this, when I went into the church, that, when I trained Alec this, when I trained Alec that. Instead, look at what we're dealing with. We're dealing with nothing to do with Alec Baldwin, nothing to do with even the Rust movie set. Score big point for the defense. Wow, thanks a lot. Let's actually not even let's not even have the trial today. I mean, remember the delay yesterday? Well, today, not even a single witness. Basically a 0 trial day. If the defense carry on this way, it's almost like a victory by default.
Not a metallurgist, but had done something to the number 2 lead shot, a single piece that serves as a rattle to differentiate live from dummies.
Okay, stand by. I'm just looking for some exhibits. We've got a lot right now, so I need to flip through for a second.
Missing remote, Timmy says thank you. Thank you.
The dummy rounds that you provided to the set of Rust, did you personally ensure that they were all inert?
Absolutely.
And was the box full when you provided it to Rust?
It was 50 rounds individually inserted into styrofoam, each housing, each section. So it's essentially a 5 row wide, 10 row deep styrofoam insert that holds the rounds separately from each other, and then is inserted into a small white enclosing box, cardboard box.
And when you provided them to the set of Rust, how did they get there? Did you drive there yourself?
Sarah Zachary, the prop master of Rust, came by my office and brought a gun that they were having trouble with, reassembling that gun after it was being cleaned. So I quickly put that back together, met with her, chatted, and gave her the dummy rounds.
And is that the only box that you provided?
Yes.
Did anything from this box that we have here, or this container, Defendant's Exhibit A21, was any of that sent to the set of Rust?
Absolutely not.
Let me ask you, did you also supply props and ammunition to the set of a movie called The Old Way?
No ammunition.
No.
Blanks and dummy rounds, yes.
And do you know who the armorer was on the set of The Old Way?
Hannah Gutierrez Reed.
And
that's a movie starring Nicolas Cage. It's actually on Netflix at the moment. Actually, I don't think it is on Netflix. It's streaming on our local stream station here.
you indicated that you didn't supply ammunition. If you know, do you know if dummy rounds were used on the set of The Old Way?
They were. Dummy rounds were used.
And where did those dummy rounds come from if you didn't provide them?
They came.
So I do want to deal with Alec walking out of court yesterday, and I also want to deal with the manufacturer of the weapon, Pieta, basically the owner of the company, talking about can the gun fire itself. So I do want to deal with that today. So I just want to kind of go through. Let's hear what's going on live for the moment. If you guys want me to go through that, we can definitely jump to that.
Came from Thale Reed.
How do you know that?
Because I witnessed them packing up her car and assembling all the blanks and dummy rounds that she was going to need.
So, did Hannah stay in touch with you when she was working as the armorer on the set of The Old Way?
Loosely, yes.
Did you receive any communications from her regarding the use of live rounds in the prop gun?
She did. She did reach out to me.
How? Text? Call?
Both. She called on one particular day because she had been looking for 45 Colt ammunition, live ammunition to shoot.
How did you know that?
Because she asked me at the office. And I thought it was odd because Thale had live ammunition and why was he not giving his daughter any? I found it peculiar. So at one point in her travels from Albuquerque to Livingston, Montana, she stops along the way and stays with friends in Denver, Colorado. And at one point between Denver, Colorado and Livingston, Montana on her travels, she called me and told me she finally had found live ammunition, 45.
So once she makes it to Montana, does she contact you about shooting live ammunition out of the prop guns?
She does. She texts me this time and she asks if she can shoot live ammunition out of the set guns.
Well, how did you respond?
I said absolutely not, and it's a big mistake, and I even said it always ends in tears.
And did you have any additional communications with her about live rounds after that?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So after you take your box of dummy rounds and you give it to Sarah Zach.
Does anyone know if Baldwin is found guilty, what is the maximum sentence he can receive? Does anyone know the answer?
Zachary, do you ever see it again?
Only in the evidence photos.
Okay, so let's look at those. Defendant's Exhibit A27, previously entered into evidence. Do you see that?
I do.
And do you know what we're looking at here?
I do.
Describe to us what we're looking at.
Well, these are these antiqued rounds that came off the set of 1883, actually more specifically the prop truck of 1883. And you can see that they're heavily aged. And this is after each one has been polished with Quado steel wool for about a minute.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, okay.
What about this one? Does this one look different?
Yeah, absolutely. The case is way too bright. It looks nearly new.
And so that is what's quite also incredible about this case is we talking about a maximum sentence of, same as Hannah, 1.5 years. 1.5 years. A woman is dead, and the maximum sentence that anyone involved can get is 1.5 years. Pretty shocking. And look at this incredible indignation. How dare you put me on trial? How dare you accuse me? How dare I be expected to spend 1.5 years or less in a situation where a woman has lost 30 or 40 years of her life?
And that is an anomaly. I do not believe that came from me because all the rounds were heavily aged.
Okay. I'm going to show you what is entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 30. Do you see that?
I do.
What is that a photo of?
It looks to be the same antique rounds, dummy rounds that I provided Rust.
Okay. So you provide these to the set of Rust, and obviously there's an incident and Ms. Hutchins dies. Do you then reach out to law enforcement and begin communicating with law enforcement?
I do.
Why?
Well, I think they wanted access to the guns that were on the prop truck near the set of Rust. And there was some text message discussions regarding that. I offered to open the safe to
Why did you have a combination to the safe on the set of Rust?
I actually didn't until I think the day that I met former Detective Hancock at the prop truck, the day that they executed the warrant. I didn't actually have the combination until Sarah Zachary gave it to me.
So Ms. Zachary gave you the combination and you were able to open the safe?
I didn't actually physically open it myself. I never went onto the prop truck, just passed along
Okay,
to...
what did you do then?
Well, I met off to the side with Detective Hancock at the time, and at one point Sarah Zachary was there as well while they were searching the prop truck, and as well as opening and starting to pull guns out of the safe.
Okay. Do you recall having a conversation with Detective Hancock where you asked Mr. Teskey to provide information about rounds?
I do.
Tell us about that.
Well, it was one of 2 or 3 times that I went up to the sheriff's department to provide evidence or something that I thought might be of value to the investigation. And upon one of those visits, we were in the interview room and I was just trying to figure out where these live rounds could have come from. And I thought possibly Troy Teskey might have something that was similar. And so I called him while we were in the interview room, and I believe it was being recorded with Detective Hancock right there. And we started the dialogue. And at that point, it went into a text exchange with pictures as well, with at least one picture.
I haven't had an opportunity to mark this as evidence, but I'd like to. I only have a digital copy of it, but I intend to use this with the witness. This is as an offer of proof, Your Honor. This is a copy of the text message between Mr. Teskey and Mr. Kenney. So I'd like to just go ahead and display it, and I can mark it and provide it to the court.
The jurors aren't here because this is a motion that's being heard. It's a motion to dismiss. The allegation is that the prosecution didn't hand over evidence. Basically what happened was someone came in 3 years later, said, I've got this round or something. And then the crime scene technician and others, I think, didn't feel it was actually related to the whole thing. And so they didn't file it under the whole Rust thing, which the defense are now saying that is improper and that case should be dismissed because they are hiding away evidence. That's what this is all about. I must say, this all happened after Hannah was convicted, which makes one wonder, where did this whole idea come from? Who suddenly got the great idea to do this? Because it's so fortuitous, so lucky, so beneficial to the defense. It's a little bit like hitting the jackpot.
I just don't have a paper copy of it. Do you need to see it?
No, I know what this stuff is.
Okay, let's go.
What is it going to be? These are going to be, actually, this is a separate motion hearing, so when I marked that the supplemental as courts 13, I think I should have marked it separately as courts 1.
Okay.
Motion hearing. And then while we're here, I have not marked those. So those are courts 2.
These are the ammunition?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So what do you want me to mark this exhibit that I'm going to use with Mr. Kenney?
Well, now you're going to have to, well, let me do this. Let me make this courts Roman numeral 1 and courts Roman numeral 2, and then you can keep your 1s and he can keep his alphabet. You can keep your numerics.
I should just continue with the next exhibit.
No, because we're in a motion hearing.
Right. So we'll call this State's Exhibit 1.
Right.
Okay, got it.
Now, you also introduced.
Fly on the Wall says, can Hannah use this on appeal? Well, it depends on what the outcome is of this motion hearing. If the judge dismisses this case, then I think there may be grounds for appeal and even grounds to, dismiss the case against Hannah out of hand and She may even be due for some restitution for time spent in jail.
Some other evidence, which you can refer to, you don't have to reintroduce it, we'll just identify it as like 27 from the trial, okay?
Is that, okay.
All right. Okay. Can you mark this, can you mark that for me, courts 2, Roman numeral 2?
Is there a reason I'm not seeing this on the monitors? Oh, sorry, did I miss that?
Okay, well, he's doing this first. So
Okay, sure.
Yeah, right there, right on top. Thank you. Okay.
Do you see what's in front of you, sir?
Video.
Is this what? Tell us what we're looking at here, and if you can, and what we're looking at is going to be State's Exhibit 1 for the motion hearing. I'm enlarging it, and I'll move it away again. Can you see the date?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
What is it?
November 1, 2021.
So tell us what we're looking at. What were the circumstances of this?
This is, once I had called Troy Teskey in the interview room at the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office with Detective Hancock present. He was somewhere out and about, and he said he would be home in about 5 minutes or so. And at that point, I asked him if he had any of the reloads that Thale had owned for a number of years that a common friend of ours had manufactured for him. And I asked for samples.
Hang on. Why would Troy Teskey have Thale Reed's ammunition?
Troy used to store Thale's guns and ammunition for him at his home.
Okay. So you ask Troy if he has any of the leftover reloads.
Correct.
And so is what we're looking at, the leftover reloads that you're asking about, did they go to 1883?
They're the same reloads, but they never cross paths once Thale leaves Bullhead City with the ammo can of 325. That are those reloads. These reloads are some of the ones that Thale left along with his guns for Troy Teskey to store.
So these never went to the set of 1883?
Absolutely not.
And
Definitely not a set.
Okay, whatever. The cowboy training camp. Yeah. And did they ever go to you?
No.
Because they never went to you, were you ever able to intentionally or mistakenly provide them to the set of Rust?
Definitely not. And they're not even, the brass primers are a dead giveaway for that which was not on Rust.
And you bring me to my next question. Are you familiar with the way that the live rounds found on the set of Rust look?
I am.
Do they look like these?
No.
So let's look at the text exchange here at the bottom. Who's communicating?
My text is in green, and Troy's is on the left side in black and white.
So what?
Yeah, so Katie Cat says, so if they dismiss this case and Hannah's plea goes through, is anyone going to be held culpable for this poor woman's death? Answer, no. No one's going to be held culpable. So that is where we are right now. It's, that is what we're dealing with.
What does Troy say?
Excuse me. Again, glasses are horrible. Sorry about this. Yeah, thank you. Just below the picture, Troy writes, I checked a bunch of the rounds. These are the 4 different types that I could find. And I reply, yep, it's evidence in the accidental death.
And hang on, we're going to stop there. Why did you think this was evidence in the accidental death?
Well, I think at that point, without having seen the evidence photos and knowing, the only thing I did see was Detective Hancock shared with me a black and white 8.5 by 11 piece of paper with some.
So just in a broad sense, what we're talking about is they're trying to get this case dismissed on a technicality. That's really what this is all about.
With some pictures on it, and I saw Starline brass, and it was in, it was the nickel primer Starline brass case, and I hadn't really connected the dots that the gentleman that loaded these hasn't had nickel primers in 10, 12 years.
How do you know that?
Well, he says he only used Winchester primers.
No. Did you speak to him? How do you know that?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Right after Hancock and I got done with this meeting, I called him because it dawned on me that it seemed unlikely that there would be two different color primers, and so I called the gentleman.
Now, what's quite interesting with what's going on here is the defense are totally happy that the prosecution spent as much time with this witness as they want to. They're not going to object to anything. They're not going to say leading. They're not going to say hearsay. As soon as it's their client, then they're going to be on the trigger button. Objection, this, objection, that. But they are absolutely happy for what is happening right now. They are loving it. Spend as much time as you want with this particular witness. It's just a distraction from our client, and it's also a delay of the entire trial. Job done. You've ruined the initiative, if there was any, of the prosecution, and you've managed to turn the trial. I can't remember when last I observed a trial that was this chaotic and this muddled. I can't actually remember.
And I asked him, at what point, if you
What
made
gentleman? Don't use the word gentleman. We need names.
Joe Swanson.
Okay.
Okay. So I called Joe Swanson. I asked him at what point, if he remembered making the reloads for fail, which he did. I asked him which powders he might have used, and he gave me two options, and one of which was Trail Boss powder. And I asked him, I said, well, at what point would you switch between brass and nickel primers? And he said, I wouldn't. And I said, well, why? He said, well, because Winchester stopped making them 10, 12 years ago.
Not making what?
Nickel primers.
Okay.
So he only, if we look at all the evidence photos of all the blanks that Joe Swanson makes, you will not see a nickel primer in any of those blank rounds for the same reason.
Excuse me.
So you indicated to Mr. Teskey on November 1st, 2021, this is evidence in the accidental death. And you're talking about this photograph.
I am. And, well, the rounds.
The rounds
specifically
in the
rounds.
photograph.
Yes.
Have you learned a few things about the evidence in the case and the live rounds that were found on Russ since November 1st of 2021?
Yes.
Do you still believe that these are evidence in the accidental death?
Definitely not.
And then I see Mr. Teskey responds and says, okay, and then what do you say?
Can you zoom in? Thank you.
Let me see. There you go.
I reply, ugh, this sucks, but she's seriously trying to blame everyone else for her mistake.
What does he say?
He replies, who is she? Hannah? ? And I reply, Hannah.
And then you ask an important question. Read that to us.
Yeah, November 3rd, 2021, I ask Troy Teskey in text, did you see any rounds in either box with nickel primers?
What's his response?
He replies, no.
Okay. Is that just a close-up of the same photo of the ammunition?
It is.
And you have testified that this is dissimilar. This is dissimilar to the live rounds that were on the set of Rust.
Yes, and from this photo, we can only see that we have 4 different, cases, different manufacturers of cases. The brass primers are obviously a dead giveaway. But what we don't see on the inside is that the powder is different than rust. The actual powder itself, as well as the projectiles, are different than what was found on rust.
So, Mr. Kenney, the ammunition that is in this can here, that's Defendant's Exhibit A21, what happened to it? Where did it go?
I'm not seeing an exhibit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right.
I can't switch back and forth that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Can you see it? Do you want me to
The
touch?
gray bin. Yeah, the gray bin. Yep, I see it.
What happened to the ammunition that was in this can that you brought back from Texas?
It sat in that bin in the bathroom and was.
No, and ultimately, when did it leave PDQ? Under what circumstances?
Oh, when the sheriff's department executed a search warrant on my business.
They took all of it.
Yes, they weren't entitled to all of it, but I just said take all of it. The warrant specified it had to be Starline brass, and I just told them take it all.
So everything that you brought back from Texas is in the custody of the sheriff's department.
Correct.
Did you, at any point in time, did you ever exchange ammunition with Thel Reader Troy Teskey again after the death of Helena Hutchins?
No.
So any ammunition that would be in the possession of Mr. Teskey, is that anything that you have ever had possession of?
No. I've only once received 45 Colt live ammunition from someone, and that was Thale, and that on our way headed to Texas. And I hadn't opened the can until we got to Texas.
At some point in time, Mr. Kenney, did you have reason to believe that Mr. Reed and Mr. Teskey wanted to blame the introduction of the live rounds to the set of rust on you?
To varying degrees, yes. I wasn't, Thale definitely. And later on, Troy, it seemed palpable that they were trying to point the finger at me.
Okay. Let me think. Hang on just a second. I just want to make sure I'm done. How certain are you that you didn't provide any live rounds to the set of rust?
I have provided blanks and dummy rounds and guns to over 1,000 different productions. And on average, it's 5 to 10 guns per episode, per feature film. And each gun would typically have about 10 dummy rounds with it. So that's between 50 and 100,000 dummy rounds. And I have never spent more time with a single box of dummy rounds than the rounds that came from 1883, the dummy rounds that went to Ross. So there was never a question in my mind that I provided the live ammunition to Rust.
Okay, I'll pass this witness. And Mr. Spiro, is there an exhibit that you need me to provide?
Just if you could email me that.
The text message?
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So in the thousands of times you've provided ammunition to movie sets that you just told me about,
Blanks and dummy rounds.
I know, I apologize.
That's
I'm
all
not,
right.
I'm not trying to use the word ammunition to
Okay,
get you.
gotcha.
All right. In the thousands of times you've done that, that would mean,
I'm sorry, Your Honor, Ms. Johnson's asking to approach.
thousands of productions that you've
1,000-ish, not thousands.
Okay. The 1,000 productions that you've, you said over 1,000 different productions.
Feature films, episodics,
Okay. 5 to 10 guns per episode per feature film.
or an episode.
Each gun would typically have about 10 dummy rounds with it, so that's between 50 and 100,000 dummy rounds. Right?
Yes. 5,000. Yeah, that's the math. Yeah.
And you're telling this court that of all the dummy rounds, in all the productions, in all the years, these 50 were the ones that you checked the most.
They required the most time because of the antiquing and because that, again, some of them had a muddy rattle. So there was no point in providing a dummy round that had a muddy rattle to set. That's the last thing you want to have happen. And so each one had to ring clearly with the number 2 lead shot inside of it.
And of all the dummy rounds on all the sets, these ones had a muddy rattle.
No, the ones that were excluded had a muddy rattle.
I see. You provided 45 long Colt dummy rounds to the set of Russ, correct?
Yes. And more specifically through Sarah Zachary. She picked them up.
Right. And you know Sarah Zachary was at your prop house on the 12th of October, correct?
Yes.
And you came back from Albuquerque. You came back from 1883 on the 11th, at least one trip, correct?
Yeah, I arrived sometime in the middle of the night, the night of the 11th. It could have been past midnight.
You've got to put it on. Okay. Thank you. You arrived the 11th.
Night of the 11th.
She comes the 12th.
Yes.
Shooting happens on the 21st.
Yes.
Russ needed 45 long Colt dummies.
May have knew they were running short.
Okay, they may have not needed it the most of all time, but they needed it, right?
Possibly.
You have already told this court that you had brought 45 long Colt rounds from the set of 1883, correct?
The dummy rounds
Does she
from
look worried? A case might be this case that they've been researching and trying to bring to trial is possibly going to just slip away at the last moment. Does she look quite stressed? Also, notice the tone of the defense lawyer. He's really interrogating this witness. He's treating the witness like he's a criminal, isn't he?
the prop truck. Yes.
There were also live ammunition on 1883, correct?
No.
There was no live ammunition on the set of 1883, not on the set of 1883, at the cowboy camp, just off the set of 1883.
Not even close to anything that was filming.
Okay, so not anywhere close to filming, not on the set, but at 1883's cowboy camp.
The cowboy training camp for 1883. Yes.
Okay.
Live, yes.
And you brought some of those live rounds to PDQ, correct?
Yes.
The live 45 long Colt rounds to PDQ, correct?
Yes.
And you've told this court that when you brought them back, they were between 50 and 100, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you provided 45 long Colts. Again, you say dummies, I get it. To Sarah Zachary, correct?
Correct.
Those were Starline brass with nickel primers, correct?
Yes.
The invoice you provided to Sarah Zachary and the set of Rust had 200 listed as the amount that you provided, correct?
I don't recall.
Do you deny it?
Sounds about right. It could be. The invoice was generated weeks after, so it was done from memory at that point.
Okay. Have you been watching any of this trial?
No, just the headlines, whatever comes on the news.
Okay. Do you know that on direct examination of CST Popple, that this was entered into evidence, which is states 30?
I haven't seen her at all during
Got
this
it.
trial.
She actually said, "Can you please stop calling me an investigator?" And then he said, "Well, what do you want me to call you?" And she said, "I'm a crime scene technician." And then he said, "Well, I don't know if I want to say that every time." So she said, "Well, then just refer to me as CST." That's why there's that slight smile from the prosecutor.
Well, eventually on cross-examination, it turned out that these were, of course, the rounds provided, correct?
Except for the bright one in the lower row, in the middle, just above the 2 zeros that are next to each other, in the evidence number. I don't believe that is a round that came from PDQ.
When you say you don't believe, which I think you said a direct is you're not certain, but you don't believe, correct?
It's 2.5 years ago. It does not appear, I'm 99.9% sure that was not inclusive of the original styrofoam insert of 50 in the box.
Okay, so it sounds like you're not certain, but fairly certain, and it's been a long time. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. At the time, when your memory was fresher, you actually received a photograph of this.
I got it.
And you told Detective Hancock this, and it has a nickel primer, which is sketchy. Correct?
Can I don't know what the photograph is. A photograph of what?
Did you, in fact, tell Detective Hancock that that picture, that round, was sketchy?
I recall saying that, or texting her, possibly texting her saying that, because it was concerning, because it didn't look like any of the antique rounds that I had provided.
Right. So at the time, years ago, when you first see this, when your memory was fresher, the word you used was sketchy, correct?
I recall that, yes.
The incident happens on the 21st of October, and at 1:55 p.m., you receive a text message from Sarah Zachary telling you that this has occurred, correct?
I think it wasn't telling me that it occurred. It just said emergency in all caps.
And you called her, right?
I did. I missed a call from her, received the text. I think I said I'd call her back, and I did
Okay.
within just a minute or two.
And between the time you provided, whatever it is that you provided to Rust, and the moment you get that emergency text, isn't it fair to say you're not sitting around, daydreaming and wondering and thinking about each round you provided and whatever you provided to the set? You do this for a living. You do it lots of times, right?
That's correct, yeah.
But the moment that happens, right, things change, didn't they?
What changed?
Well, Miss Hutchins died, right?
I wasn't aware of that till hours later.
You spoke to Miss Zachary 5 times that night, right?
I don't recall. Probably.
Ms. Zachary, had the shell casing, right, at one point that evening?
No, I don't recall that.
You don't recall that?
No, that she said she held the spent case from the gun. I don't recall that.
Sarah Zachary threw out some of the evidence, correct?
I had heard that months and months afterwards, that she had thrown out dummy rounds from Jensen Ackles' gun.
Months and months?
I believe so.
Sure about that?
Fairly. It's been a long time.
Right. And the only messages that we have from around that time we're going to look at. But you knew at that moment that you had just provided 45 Starline brass dummies, correct? With nickel primers.
Nearly all the dummy rounds I provide are Starline brass.
And you would agree with me that anybody who did provide that round or brought it onto the set would have every reason to want to deny that, correct?
No. Hannah Gutierrez admitted in questioning at the sheriff's office that she brought the box that contained the live rounds.
No, she didn't. She actually said she hadn't seen that box. And that's just something that's been fed to you by the prosecutor as an extra.
No, I've actually seen the interview
Okay, well, we can pull up that interview if we need to. So,
Well, but
the week after the
Pete-
accident, you know that we have some of your text messages, right?
Yes,
Okay, and you weren't sleeping, right?
correct.
You were drinking a lot?
I don't even remember.
You were talking to your cop buddies to try to get advice about the case?
I don't recall that.
You texted Sarah Zachary in the days.
I'm quite surprised that the prosecutor doesn't object to that. You're drinking a lot, you're sleeping, blah, blah, blah. Okay.
It followed. Do not say anything or write anything to anyone, right?
All that.
Okay. You did
I
provide
think I recall that.
Detective Hancock. Do we have that photo that was entered into evidence on the screen? Okay. Did you email that? Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll get it in a minute. But the one that you just saw on the screen of you and Mr. Teskey, do you remember that photograph that you just looked at?
With the reloads?
Yeah.
Yes.
You actually took a screenshot of that and sent it to Detective Hancock, correct?
It sounds like something I would do. I don't recall doing it, but it sounds accurate.
Okay. Does it sound like, I don't have the photo, so, but the photo that you took and sent to, of the screenshot that you sent to Detective Hancock, it included that line. Yes, this is evidence in the accidental death, right?
That was my speculation prior to learning that the live rounds from Rust had nickel primers,
Well, sir, that's the problem with your testimony, isn't it?
which is what?
In the very same text chain, you asked about nickel primers. So how is it possible that you didn't know about it when you said that this is evidence in the accidental death?
Because the meeting with Hancock and the text exchange with the pitcher occurred on November 1st. 2 days later, on November 3rd, I had asked by text whether or not any of the rounds had nickel primers. And he replied, Troy Teskey replied, no. And at that point, that was the reason why.
So this is, I think it's Court Exhibit 2 perhaps of this hearing.
This one? No, mine are Roman numeral 1 and 2.
It's gonna be stakes one.
Stakes one.
I just haven't had a chance to mark it.
That's fine. We'll call it Stakes 1 for now. Do you see it on your screen?
I do.
Okay. And you say, yep, it's evidence in the accidental death, correct?
That's on November 1st, yes.
Correct. That's what you wrote, sir, right?
On November 1st, yes.
I agree.
And you didn't say anything about speculating, did you?
No.
Okay, but when you screenshot this to Detective Hancock, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, let me ask you, after he says, okay, you say, this sucks, but she's seriously trying to blame everyone else for her mistake, correct?
Yes, that's what it says.
Okay, so it's, this sucks.
So do you think we're gonna talk about Alec Baldwin's text, or are they off limits? I'm just curious, like, will Alec Baldwin's off limits?
But she's trying to blame everybody else, right?
Yes.
This sucks that it comes from the same batch,
I would-
but it's really her fault because she loaded into the weapon, right?
Well, first off, I pronounced that ugh. And then what was the second part of your question?
But it's her fault because she loaded into the weapon, correct?
Certainly.
And you said that over and over again as you continue to meet with law enforcement, that whatever happened here, it's her fault, she loaded it, correct?
Well, certainly she's responsible for loading a live round into a gun on a movie set.
How come when you provided the screenshot, this is defense 1 for the hearing. How come when you provided to the defense A, sorry, Your Honor. How come when you provided the screenshot of the text message to Detective Hancock, you left out the, this sucks. But seriously, she's trying to blame everyone else for her mistake.
If you put that back up, I think you'll see that the digital keyboard is in the way of whatever's underneath it.
I see. And is there something with your phone where you can't take multiple screenshots and just go further down like you did 10 other times in this case?
That's a picture of a picture.
I understand that, but I'm asking you,
That's,
why didn't you provide the message of, this sucks?
I did, and what I'm saying to you is that when you take a picture of a phone with a keyboard up, it's going to block the lower half of the message.
Okay, so on November 1st, you agreed to an interview with Detective Hancock, correct?
Sounds about right. Yeah.
No other
Yeah,
officers,
November 1st, yeah.
no other officers were present, correct?
It was just Hancock in the interview room, correct?
And you talked about your phone call that you made with Troy Teskey, right?
I did it in front of her.
No, I know. You were very, very cooperative, correct?
I thought so.
I don't think you mentioned on direct examination, but tell me if I'm wrong. You also made a phone call to Joe Swanson in front of Detective Hancock.
I don't recall it being in front of Hancock. It was as I was driving away, and it dawned on me that I kept on seeing brass and nickel, and it didn't wash with me. It didn't make sense.
Joe Swanson and the original batch of the ammunition was very much on your mind. Fair?
Of the reloads, yeah, I was fairly confident that somehow some of that reloaded ammunition came in through a piece of leather, or Hannah had been gotten hold of some of it, been shooting it, commingled it with dummy rounds. I was concerned that it was going to be a Joe Swanson reload.
It turns out you actually made the call to Joe Swanson within earshot of the police recording equipment. And you asked Mr. Swanson about the green ammo can.
I don't recall that.
Okay. And you then...
Now, do you notice this picture? You see Alex Spiro, you see a whole bunch of defense folk. You can't quite see the gentleman behind him, but there are quite a few people part of this defense team. And then look at Carrie Morrissey. Not too many people sitting there, right?
said,
does anyone think that Alec Baldwin's career is on the line? So does anyone think that if Alec Baldwin is found guilty, that he'll never get a acting role again? Anyone think that? Anyone think that his career is actually on the line here? I mean, he's finished the Rust movie. He's just started a reality TV documentary with his own family in it. God knows how much that's worth. Anyone think that Alec Baldwin has kind of got a lot to lose here? Even if he does lose, do you think he's not going to get work again? Anyone?
Shit. Well, she didn't do her fucking job.
Now I recall, yes.
I bet you do, right? And the she who didn't do her fucking job was the armorer, right?
Correct.
And the shit is the commingled rounds, isn't it?
Well, I think the shit was a concern that Swanson was going to get dragged into this, and it was going to have been some of his reloads that caused the death and injury.
Oh, the exclaiming of the shit was your concern for Joe?
I think it's a collective. I mean, there's 4 of them there. There's a lot of shit.
So some of the shits were for everybody that had ever touched the
The
commingle
whole,
round.
the whole thing is awful.
Okay. Can we agree that you didn't intentionally provide live ammunition to the set of rust?
We can agree that it didn't at all.
Okay. Well, we
Even
can't actually agree
Kerry's,
to that.
sorry guys, I seem to have some kind of connection problem. Not quite sure what's going on. I'll go downstairs and turn my television off. I'm not sure if that's, but something weird is going on.
Also, I wanted
Sorry
to be
about that.
there to assist in any way that I could have with the investigation. So I think they're being cordial in waiting for me to show up.
Okay.
Quite sure what's going on.
Back to PDQ. The warrant was signed by a judge authorizing them to search your property, right?
I saw that, yes.
And when you saw in the warrant that it talked about the reloads in the green ammo can, you actually started to text Detective Hancock, upset with her for including that in the warrant, didn't you?
I did.
You had video surveillance at PDQ, correct?
There was, I don't recall exactly at what point the camera overrode itself.
Well, that wasn't my question. My question was just you had surveillance footage at PDQ. In fact, in the
Yeah, but excuse me, if the footage has been overwritten, then I don't have it.
you have surveillance equipment there that records whether it's overwritten or not. You don't know. Is that your testimony?
I have surveillance equipment, yes.
Okay. And actually, during the search of PDQ, you were looking at your phone because you have a remote access trying to see the surveillance footage and what it was catching. Remember that?
I don't recall that, no.
Do you deny it?
If I was actually inside the premises,
You're inside the premises on your phone looking at the surveillance equipment that you have remote locked into your cell phone.
I don't recall. It's
But you-
possible.
Okay. And the testimony you have given this court is at that point in time, right? There's a green ammo can there, correct?
Yes.
The same green ammo can you're calling Swanson and Teskey about in front of Hancock, correct?
The sounds, yeah, roughly accurate, yes.
Right. Unwritten on it was the word empty, right?
Was it? Oh, on, yeah, black ink next to the silver duct tape on top, yes.
And lo and behold, law enforcement doesn't find anything in the empty can, right?
There was tags and office supplies and other things in it.
But we know at one point there was ammunition in it, right?
The last time was in Texas.
Nothing further.
Unless the court has any questions for the witness, I don't
This
have
witness
any.
is excused. Thank you, sir.
Okay,
Next
Detective Hancock next. This should be interesting. So apparently this lady over here is Alec Baldwin's sister.
Raise your right hand.
Do you swear affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you'll give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Have a seat, talk into the microphone.
Corporal. On November 1st of 2021, did you have a meeting with Seth Kenney?
Yes.
And what was the purpose of that meeting?
I don't know the entirety of the purpose of it, but I think it was something to do with ammunition for Rust.
And were you provided, or did Mr. Kenney share with you a photograph of ammunition?
Yes.
And do you recall the photograph?
No, I don't.
Would you recognize it if I showed it to you?
I might.
Does that look familiar?
Not entirely, no.
Okay, let me show you something else. Would it refresh your memory if you saw the text exchange between Mr. Kenney and Mr. Teskey?
Yes.
Can you see that? Do you want me, I'm gonna enlarge it. Do you see the date?
I do.
I'm gonna go down so you can see the rest of it. Do you see the rest of it?
Yes, I do.
Is that the photograph of the ammunition that was shared with you by Ms.?
Now, what's so ironic about this, it's so incredibly ironic, is this statement, this sucks, but she's seriously trying to blame everyone else for her mistake. Anyone else doing that? Anyone else who's seriously trying to blame everyone else for her mistake?
Mr. Kenney that came from Mr. Teskey on November 1st.
I remember this conversation between the two of them.
Okay, explain it to us then. And I'm sorry, I'm showing you for the record, States Exhibit 1 for the motion hearing. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Well, tell us about the conversation.
Yes.
Tell us about this meeting. What happens?
So this was a conversation with Troy and Seth, and I guess an exchange of where the rounds that Troy may have had that could have been in relation to Rust. Right? Yeah.
So, did you see this photograph on that day?
Yes.
And were you able from the photograph to determine whether or not these rounds were similar to the rounds found on the set of Rust?
These would not have been similar to what we had found on Rust.
Okay. And from this vantage.
So I know this is a little bit perhaps inappropriate, but I'm going to say it anyway. I prefer the lips of the prosecutor to the lips of the investigator. And it's no, I'm not trying to cast shade on her. I'm sure she's a good person and I'm sure she's done good work. I just find it so sad that somehow the memos come through that, I don't know, who finds the sort of Botox thing attractive. I mean, I think if you maybe in your 60s or 70s, you might want to think about doing it. But you know what I'm getting at? It's like, I don't know. It's just a sad thing in young folk today that this is happening. Sorry, I can't help just mentioning that.
Vantage point. How can you see that?
So some of them, well, a lot of them have an actual head stamp of companies or manufacturers such as Winchester, BHA, I think the other one says CBC. It's a little hard to see with the shadowing.
No, this is Detective Hancock. She actually interviewed Hannah. She interviewed Seth. She interviewed Alec Baldwin, and she did a good job. In
the picture. The only one out of these that would have been somewhat similar to what we had found on Rust is the third one from the left, which shows the Starline brass logo and it says 45 Colt. However, a distinguishable difference in this round and what we had found on Rust would have been the color of the primer. They're different colors.
Okay. If you recall, did you yourself ever have a conversation with Mr. Teskey?
Not where it was just me and him, but I have had a conversation with him in the conversation.
So let me ask you this. After you were provided this information, the photograph and the information about the rounds, where was your understanding of where those rounds were located?
In Arizona.
And did you have any communications with Mr. Teskey about obtaining those rounds?
Yeah, I had asked Mr. Teskey at least a couple times for him to figure out how to send those rounds to the sheriff's office. I asked him on a couple different occasions to either ship them or figure out a way that we could still get them in the sheriff's office possession.
And you wanted to do that even though they didn't appear to match the rounds from Rust?
Yes.
Why?
Because the investigation in itself was still very fresh at that time. It was still ongoing. I wanted to make sure that we had all the information that was brought forward to us in order to continue this investigation.
Did you see Mr. Teskey at Ms. Gutierrez's trial?
I did.
And were you aware that Mr. Teskey was a friend of Ms. Gutierrez's father?
Yes.
Did you receive any communications during the Gutierrez trial relating to Mr. Teskey?
I did.
Tell us about those.
So during her Hannah's trial, or near the end of it, I had gotten some correspondence that a male by the name of Troy Teskey had came in and had ammunition, and that he wanted to turn it over.
Came in where?
To the courts.
So he came here?
Yes.
To this building?
Yes.
And who did he speak to, if you know?
He spoke to I believe the deputies downstairs that were working the courts.
And what were you doing at that point in time?
I was here in trial.
So you receive information that there's a person down there that has what?
Ammunition.
And how did you respond? What did you do?
I had asked the deputy, I said, can you just have him wait here until I have a moment that I can speak with him.
Did he wait for you?
No.
Where do we go from here? What happens next?
From there, I believe we had a break. I had asked where Troy was. They said he was no longer here. And then further on into the day, I don't know if it was a call or a text message, but I had gotten word that Troy had shown up to the sheriff's office and was trying to turn over that ammunition. At that point, we're still in trial, so I have a little bit of limited time and where I need to figure out logistics with this. And I believe I had gotten a call from the lieutenant or someone there, and I said, okay, well, I'm still here, but I will make contact with him at a later point and get a statement from him so we can figure out what to do with this.
And at that point in time, were you aware that he had left some ammunition at the sheriff's department?
Yes.
And did you take steps to contact Mr. Teskey to take his statement?
I did. I called him twice when I had found out that he had shown up to the sheriff's office. I didn't receive, or he didn't pick up the phone, and I never received a call back.
And let me ask you, why is it important for you to take his statement?
Because I need to figure out what to do with this ammunition and how it would potentially be tied to the case and in what way, so I can figure out what to do with it after that.
At the time that you were reaching out to him that day, do you have any idea whether or not this is related to the case?
Just by him saying it might be, but not in what context it would have been.
But you didn't speak to him?
No.
Okay. And is that the reason you were trying to reach him?
Yes. And to try to set up something where I could have a discussion or an interview with him.
And you want to have the interview because you want to see if it's tied to the case?
Yes.
So you call him twice, and does he respond?
No.
Do you continue to try to reach him?
I did try to reach him again. I believe it was the following week. I tried to reach out a couple times and never received a response back.
So if you don't have a witness who will give you an interview regarding the items that they've dropped off at the sheriff's department, how do you know that they're in any way related to the case?
I really wouldn't, because I didn't have a discussion with him.
Has Mr. Teskey ever returned your calls?
No.
That's weird. Why can't he testify here?
Did you,
Don't you guys think that's weird?
are you aware that the exchange between Mr.
I mean, if he's so invested and he's gone to so much effort, then why doesn't he not make himself available? Isn't that weird?
Teskey and the people at the sheriff's department that took place when you were in trial with me, are you aware that at least part of that was recorded on a body-worn camera?
I know now.
When did you learn that?
Today?
And have you had an opportunity to review it?
We've never
Yes.
been given this, Your Honor.
I just got it. So
I just want the court to know. This is,
I can give it to them.
this is the newest of the revelations.
So there's when Teskey comes into the station, it's being recorded on a body worn camera?
I believe that the defense did have it because they knew what Mr. Teskey was saying to Popple. That's the basis of the cross-examination.
Well, it's not, it hasn't been admitted as an exhibit.
Sure, and I can call Popple and have it admitted as an exhibitor. I can call Brandle, but it's a motion hearing. How do you want me to handle it? She's now seen it. I can give it to the defense.
No, I'm going to have the person that, whose body it was on. Let me ask you, in the meantime, while I'm listening to this testimony, can I have the exhibits from Popple that she testified about the bullets and what they were, when they went to the FBI?
I've forgotten who's on trial now. Is it Teskey, Hancock, Hannah, Halls, Kenney? Sorry, who is actually on trial now?
Her inventory of bullets. May I have those exhibits? I know there's a lot of them.
Sure. I think there are probably some also from the defense. So does the defense want to go through their file? Do you want me
I
to
just
do it?
want the ones that Popple testified off of, not any cross.
Are you looking for the one that I just highlighted specifically?
No, I'm looking for the ones that Popple testified, she inventoried.
Now, I must say, I love the law, and I sometimes think, because I did study the law for 3 years at university, what would have happened if I had become a lawyer? But I must say, when I see this sort of thing, I'm like, thank God I'm not. All of this admin, all of this nonsense. And I memean, this kind of admin bullshit is what lawyers deal with constantly. And it's the kind of thing that I wouldn't have much patience with, that's for sure.
And had tested.
Are you asking for scene photos or no? Just the ones that she had at the sheriff's
Yes,
department?
where she went through and some were in Ziplocs.
Okay, so not seeing photos, just the ones from the sheriff's department? Okay.
Do you have those?
There should be.
And just for the record, Judge, we don't have the body worn camera.
But I'm hearing you. I want to look at the bullets. The physical. I'll take the physical.
The physical, is it in the You don't need photos of boxes?
No,
just
no,
okay.
I want what she testified of, the ones that were gathered at the scene, and then she went through how she tested them. There. Okay. All right, I think these are fine, Ms. Morrison. Okay, thank you.
37, 36, 37, 38.
Oh, so you want the actual bullets?
Well, these are fine.
Okay.
Well, I was
Photographs.
gonna take the photos, but these are good too.
Okay.
Are
You
these,
want the photos?
Just look how chaotic this courtroom is. I don't know what the judge is doing. The paralegals are on the floor sorting through documents. It's a shit show.
may I ask, are these aren't all that were gathered at the scene, were they?
They are,
These are the sum total?
correct. There were only 5 live rounds, in addition to the spent casing.
Okay, which ones were only the live rounds tested by the FBI? No, there were more that were tested by the FBI.
There were dummy rounds that were sent to the FBI that were confirmed to be dummy rounds.
Okay, that's what I want to look at.
The
Do you have
dummy-
pictures? Do you have pictures of that?
I don't think we've had her testify to that. I don't know.
Can I have all the exhibits that were entered while she testified? That's the best way to put it.
Sure. Right.
Sorry to interrupt.
No. Do you want them from the state and the defense?
So it almost feels like we've gone from pre-trial to trial, back to pre-trial, or even pre-trial. Remember, this is supposed to be a 8-day trial, and we've kind of already lost a day and a half. That leaves you with basically just next week, and this isn't done either. So I think they're going to need a continuance or something.
Yes.
Okay, because
Do you want to announce what they are? Hayden, can you tell us what the exhibits are during Popple's testimony? Or I actually can, because I took notes. Here they are. Let me do it.
Like 16, 17.
hang on, we need to catch up with you if you're.
Well, if anyone can lip read, you can actually see his lips. I wonder what he is saying.
All right. Do you want me to tell you what they are?
I think Brian next to me has them. I'm just trying to get there. So I don't want you to list them off to me yet.
Well, it's just 15 through,
He seems in a good mood. I
21.
mean, today's gone well for
And I'm
him,
looking
especially
to
compared
start
to
here at
yesterday.
15. I'm not finding 15, so give me just a minute.
I mean, the jury
I've got
aren't even.
18 set aside. I've got 17 set aside. 15, 16. What was the other one? That's 15, 16, 17, and 18.
Linda says, I wouldn't work in legal again for anything. Yeah.
18.
okay. And then,
Now, Massa, I liked the judge during the Hannah trial. I thought she was reasonable, sensible, fair. I'm definitely liking her less and less as each day goes by in terms of this. I can't quite say why, but I definitely am not. I feel, I don't know, she just is very different in this trial.
20, 21, 23.
Okay, slow down. because it's, if you would, please. What was the, give me the first number again, we've got a ton of
20,
exhibits.
20, 21,
20 and 21?
23, 25.
Hang on. This is 20, you
No,
want that?
no, I just want the desk.
21 is the
You can
shot
go
of the
whenever you
pew,
Yeah, I don't want the pew. I want
okay, what else?
So Mr. Baldwin wants to kind of be excused. It's almost like, okay, you guys, it's my trial, but you guys sort it out. I'm going to go and do something else. It's probably going to, maybe it's a bathroom break, but still.
just,
So here's 10, do you want that? That's a scene photo, but she testified to it.
a scene photo. What do you mean?
It's from the set of Rust, it was taken on the set.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want these? This does, okay. This one has ammunition on it?
Which is that from, oh, no, I don't want,
This
I
is
only
9.
want the ones on the set.
This
not-
is a
not
courtroom in total
PDQ.
disarray,
Okay.
total chaos.
So what I'm handing you is all photos of state's exhibits that were of ammunition. Do you want the spent casing?
No.
Okay. Do you want me to go through the defendant's exhibits?
I want the defendant to go through the defendant's exhibits.
I'm glad you asked.
Do you want this?
Yeah, sure. Where's
Okay,
that?
that's the spent casing.
Okay, yeah.
Those are the ones I have.
I have them here.
There you go, Judge.
Oh, thank you so much. These are it? After all I asked for? Seems kind of thin from what I.
You know what? Hang on just a second. Let me go through these real quick.
All right.
Stop for just a second. Let me see
Could
what's
be.
in front of me.
These are enough. These are enough. These are enough. Okay? I'm good. I'm good. All right, let me just use these, okay? Let me just see if I might ask for more later. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt your question.
No, that's fine. Due to Mr. Teskey's refusal to speak to you, were you ever able to tie the items that he dropped off at the sheriff's department to the set of Rust?
No.
Given that this is a motion hearing, and if the court wants me to do this a different way, please tell me. Over the lunch break, were we able to obtain the video and watch it?
Yes.
Did you hear what Mr. Teskey said in the video regarding whether or not these came from the set of Rust?
He said that they were not from the set.
That's what he said on the video.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm happy to get,
He can't cross-examine off of this.
sure, and I can get it to him.
Well, you are going to give it to him, and this testimony, he can call her back up if he wants, but,
Absolutely, sure. I'll pass the witness.
all right, I have,
Just don't know how it's relevant if that ammunition didn't come from Rust, then what are we talking about?
questions. Can you put back on that video of the text that Seth Kenney got from Teskey?
If you guys have a flash drive, I'll give you that video right now.
And can you blow that up
Hi, Shalini. Thanks for joining
Go to the
us.
top or the bottom?
at the top?
Okay,
All right, I'm going to ask some questions.
sure.
Mr. Baldwin is back.
All right, so you testified that that only one seemed similar. Let's see. One similar to the Starline Brass Color Primer in Arizona, and that it's the third one. It says 45 Colt.
It didn't seem similar in the primer. It was different in the primer color. So
In what, why is it different in the primer color?
because the primer on this The third one is it's a brass color. The primers that came from rust were silver.
That's right.
Put this, who's this, these are, you counsel, you need to come up. Counsel, you need to come up. I'm questioning, you're gonna need to see this, both of you.
I can see what you're showing her. I saw what you're showing her.
I only see one silver here.
Right, but this is in reference to the live ammunition.
Look, you just testified. Let me just ask this. None of these look similar to the set on rust,
To the live ammunition.
to the live ammunition on
Yes,
rust.
ma'am. Yes, Your Honor.
But it still looks similar to what was on rust.
Yes, yes.
It
I don't
looks
know. I feel like the judge isn't really understanding this, but anyway.
similar to these on rust.
For the dummies, yes.
Yes, it looks similar to dummies on rust.
Dummies, but not live.
Okay, I understand your distinction on
Okay.
live. But they still look similar. That one, the third one from the left, still looks similar to dummies on rust.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Can I proceed, John?
Yes.
I may not even need the video right now, so we can start without that.
All right.
Good afternoon, Corporal. When you started investigating this case, you were investigating this concept of sabotage, that there could have been an intentional live bullet placed onto the set. Do you remember that?
Not originally, but later on, yes.
Okay, and
And guess where that idea came from? The idea of sabotage. Anyone know? Anyone have any idea where that idea for sabotage came from? Yeah, that's what I thought. See what you guys say. Shalimi says no idea. Well, it came from Hannah's father, Thal Reed. Thal Reed said, I think it's, let me just show you. So he gave this interview, and then he said, let's see if I can find it. So her father said she didn't need any more training. She's got me, and there you go. Both Reed and his daughter's attorney said they believe sabotage was behind the fatal incident. Sabotage is the most likely probability. Somebody wanted to cause a safety incident. Nobody wanted anybody to be killed. We developed evidence, blah, blah, blah. So obviously that's in Hannah's interest to put forward a theory like that. It's really the Rust version of the Karen Reed defense, which is a conspiracy. And so now you have the same thing. A conspiracy that involved that implicated Hannah, a conspiracy that implicated or got Alec Baldwin into trouble. Yeah, well, it's a nice theory, but is there any evidence? And it is, I don't know, once again, is that the best you can do in terms of this is how you're defending your client?
obviously, if somebody,
I missed the question. Let me just ask it. So they They're not similar to the live rounds. That was not similar to the live rounds, but they were similar to the dummies on rust.
That's correct.
Okay, and the dummies on rust were tested with the live ammo by the FBI.
Yes, some of the dummies were sent.
Some of the dummies that look like that one on the phone.
I couldn't say which exact ones were sent to the FBI.
Okay, but you just testified that that looks similar to the dummies on rust.
Yes.
You didn't differentiate, and that some of the dummies on rust were sent to the FBI.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, at certain point early on in this case, you entertained the possibility that this was an actual sabotage, that somebody could have intentionally placed the lethal bullet onto set, correct?
Yes.
And you quickly dispensed of that concept, right?
I don't think it was quickly dispensed. It was investigated.
Okay. And fair to say that if that had happened, that would have been a far different case, right?
It could have been. I don't.
And so then you turn to the idea of, well, somebody outside of Rust could have placed or been the cause of the ammunition ending up on set. And you interviewed Seth Kenney, I think you told this court yesterday, 10 times at least, right?
Yeah, I can't put an exact number, but it was a few times, yes.
Right. And that would have been a different case also, right?
If he had provided them? In relation to this case or in relation to the past case?
In relation to any case.
It's hard to say.
Well, you were here for investigator, I'm going to do this again, CST Popple's testimony yesterday, weren't you?
Yes.
And you've had an opportunity to view the 45 Starline brass that came out of this package today, correct?
No.
You haven't looked at it yet?
No.
Okay.
She was excluded as a witness, I think.
And are you aware, as you sit here, that there was 45 long Colt Starline brass nickel in the courtroom today from CST Popple?
I just found that out today.
Okay. So you were here for this testimony in this courtroom. And let me ask you, Ms. Popple, the ammunition that the Good Samaritan, Mr. Teskey, the close friend of Hannah Gutierrez's dad, when that ammunition that he brought into you after the conviction, you still have it? Answer, yes. Question, you can bring it in here and you can show it to the jury, right? Answer, yes. And they can see for themselves that it does not match the live ammunition from the set of Rust, correct? Yes. And that it is obvious. Just when you look at it, it is not. Yes. Do you remember that testimony that you were sitting here for?
Yes, I do.
And that turns out to be completely false, doesn't it?
You're correct.
Mr. Kenney was just here. Did you see him in the hallway?
I saw him in passing, yes.
You interviewed him, I think you said over 10 times, right?
Yeah, I don't know the exact number.
40 plus phone calls, I think.
It was a lot.
Okay. And we have some of those text messages. And I'm going to put up defense. Defense B. On the screen. And it's not working. Okay.
What are we going to be looking at here?
Okay. And you see at the top, this is a screenshot that he's sending you, right?
Yes.
And you see it ends with, yup, it's evidence. Here, I'll read it. Yup, it's evidence in the accidental death, right?
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay. And he does not include the, ugh, this sucks when he sends it to you, right? You don't see any, ugh, this sucks on this, do you?
No.
It talks about how it's clearly, it looks like it's been reloaded. And that's him telling you that, right?
Sorry, let me just read it really quick.
Sure.
Okay.
And you ask a very interesting question Corporal, it sounds a lot like the question the court just asked you. You asked, do you think it could have come from the same batch since it's a different color, right?
Yes.
And he says, in writing, in no uncertain terms, I thought the same thing regarding the primer, but Joe has been known to mix different color primers and blanks. So no, still highly likely that it's from the same batch. Did I read that right?
Yes.
And you had that information in the month following the incident, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to fast forward. I'm not going to go through the Seth Kenney story with you today, okay?
Okay.
But it's fair to say, if we even fast forward to the end, Mr. Teskey comes in, and you had known Mr. Teskey's name because Seth Kenney had called him in front of you, right?
Yes.
And Seth Kenney's name came up, withdraw. Troy Teskey's name came up several times because Seth Kenney brought him up several times, right?
Yes.
In relation to the idea that the same batch of rounds from 1883 had at different points and different quantities touched Joel Swanson, Troy Teskey, Seth Kenney, right? They were all involved.
I don't know if it was in relation to 1883 or where it originated from exactly, but that it might be related, might be.
And that they would talk about in front of you on speakerphone the green ammo can that had leftover ammunition, correct?
Maybe, I'm not too sure.
Well, you're not denying that, are you?
No, I'm not.
Okay. And
Okay, so we are approaching the 2-hour mark, and I don't know about you, but I want to move on to something else. So we're going to deal with Baldwin leaving the court yesterday. I hope that's okay with you. Is that okay
As you're
with
in
you?
law enforcement, you're the person who, when they do something wrong, you're the last person they want to see.
So this was really where, this was yesterday, and this was where it was actually about Alec Baldwin, right? You can see today is not about Alec Baldwin whatsoever. It's almost like Baldwin said to his defense team, fucking do your jobs. You know, I don't want to be in the crosshairs of this court and look at the chaos the next day. But anyway, this is what happened yesterday during the afternoon session.
You live a very, very difficult but ultimately very narrow life. I believe. Hang on, let me finish it a little bit.
Now you're going to see what I want you to pay attention to, and I mean, just look at that. Baldwin is sort of pursing his lips. She's looking a little concerned. He is kind of looking towards Baldwin out the corner of his eye. And you're going to see Baldwin start to do this. It's like he's being wound up, right? And he is being wound up. And then the next thing, he bolts. And you're not really allowed to do that. Can you imagine Chad Daybell just walking out the court? Karen Reed just walking out the court? Laurie Vallow just walking out the court? You can't just walk out the court. The person who's on trial can't just leave the court. And so watch how this builds up. Listen to what Carrie Morris is saying and watch how it builds up with Baldwin. I don't know if you can see is also doing that. Look at that.
Well, it all goes.
Is being wound up is like, it's like he's being triggered. I mean, he's literally being triggered.
I think we've got like three or four pages, so I think it all kind of goes together. Hang on just a second.
And that pursing of the lips is like he's trying to hold in this kind of thing that's almost like exploding and overwhelming him. He's just trying to hold it back. Can you see she's looking at him as well, like, uh-oh, I think I know what's coming. Look at her face. Look at his face. I mean, there's I mean, that is absolutely what's going on. Is like a volcano ready to blow.
Okay, so this part, I mean, the part at the bottom of 18, it puts in context the part.
Now, that's also very important. He glances back, and I wouldn't be surprised if is thinking, I don't want to be here. I don't have to be here. I'm not going to be here. I don't have to deal with this. And so I think he glances back at the door like, would it be the end of the world if I just got up and walked to the door? In other words, I think he may have looked at Hilaria. She's also in that direction, but I think he's looking at the door like, I think I'm going to do this. I know what I want to do. I think I'm going to do it.
Part at the top of 19, and this goes directly to Mr. Baldwin's motivation to lie.
Now, do you think he likes hearing that? Mr. Baldwin's motivation directly to lie. Now he's like at the epicenter of all of this. And think about what today's been. Today's been as far from Baldwin as it can possibly be. And you kind of get the feeling after this happened that there was a big showdown with his attorneys where he basically said, I'm not paying you for this, right? And look at what happened in court today. Not a single witness was heard, really. And Baldwin came out of it looking all shiny and new.
About pulling the trigger of the gun. I'm 63 years old with 6 kids. I can't rely on luck anymore. Did
you see his attorney really basically panic there? And look at her face. She's like, oh, fuck. That's kind of what she's thinking. She's also looking around, and now everyone's going to look around in a second.
Talking about his career and that he can't rely on luck anymore. This goes exactly to his motivation not to tell the truth. Sorry.
Went to the bathroom.
Can we approach briefly?
Sure.
I don't know if you saw her face. Her eyes were like extremely wide a moment ago. So, you know, what to me is so incredible about that moment is it's kind of like in the Hancock Reed case, one of the witnesses came in and he was waving the gun around and they actually said, can you please not point this gun at anyone and can you show that it's safe? He basically demonstrated exactly what was wrong with the whole, you know, in terms of the armorer, with the whole safety aspect. What Baldwin has done here is essentially the same thing, although I don't think the jury is present. I don't think he would have ever done that with a jury present. But basically him walking off is basically showing the rules don't apply to me. None of this applies to me. I don't have to ask anyone if I want to do something. Let's go watch it again. And you see the build-up.
He's 3 years old with 6 kids. I can't rely on luck anymore. He's 63 years old with 6 kids. Motivation to lie about pulling the trigger of the gun.
And so when she says motivation to lie about pulling the trigger of the gun, that's what triggers him. That's like the last thing he once heard in court. And he's so intolerant of it. It's so intolerable to him that he doesn't want to, he can't actually be there when it's actually mentioned. And so it's kind of a bit of a drama queen moment, right? And I must say, I was thinking, I wonder who keeps who in check between Baldwin and his lawyer. But I think this answers the question, because you see his lawyer kind of wheeling around, kind of very flummoxed, dumbfounded. Wow, what is happening here? And so you definitely know who's wearing the pants in the client-lawyer relationship here, don't you? I mean, who is giving who the orders?
I'm 63 years old with 6 kids. I can't rely on luck anymore. He's talking about his career and that he can't rely on luck anymore. This goes exactly to his motivation not to tell the truth. Sorry.
Went to the
Can we,
bathroom.
can we approach briefly?
Sure.
And so you'll look at her face. I don't know, it's just priceless. Anyway, so, and then he comes back with a cup of coffee, like nothing has happened. Yeah. I just want to show him coming back in the courtroom. Here he comes. I just want to get a cup of coffee.
No, I know. And we're asking two different questions.
Now, what I find pretty crazy about this is I don't think the judge admonished him. I don't think that the judge said anything about it, nothing. And I must say, I can't imagine in any other courtroom, if Chad Abel had done that, the judge not saying anything. In the Karen Reid trial, if she just walked out when it suited her, that judge not saying anything. I honestly cannot think of any other courtroom with any other judge. Think about the Michelle Troconis trial. If she just stood up and walked out the court, I can't imagine the judge just not saying anything. And so I think that actually tells you a lot about what's going on here. That the judge is feeling pressured, and the judge is feeling that these high-powered attorneys are calling the shots, and she's going to let them call the shots. She doesn't want to be, I guess, embarrassed or whatever it is. So she's almost like letting them have their way because they are obviously, they kind of know their stuff. But just like courtroom 101, do you let the defendant just walk around and go and get a coffee? Nobody in a courtroom is really allowed to just get up and leave like that. I'm talking about kind of in the front. You would just imagine that someone would ask a question and most people would just wait for the recess. So I must say, in the history of watching trials, this to me is pretty damn crazy. Now, the craziness didn't end there, because when Carrie Morrissey presented what she wanted to present, she actually pulled that board and blocked off Baldwin and Alex Spiro and everyone. And I think she did that on purpose, which is also quite funny. She used this board to put it like in front of him so that you couldn't actually see him. And it just makes you realize just how childish and how much animus there is in this courtroom. Everyone's tense and everyone's upset, and a lot of that has been caused by the reputation preceding him of this particular lawyer. You can say he hasn't lost a case in 10 years. Okay, well then we better, if he says jump, we better just ask how high, right? I don't know where I'm sitting. I'm not like bowled over by how fantastic his case is. I'm really not, but I'm also not sitting there on camera. Okay, so that's the one thing I want to show you. This is the other. This was actually, to me, quite a strong moment in the case where the gun manufacturer spoke about exactly what was said a bit earlier. Can the gun fire itself?
This particular gun fires.
What that mean?
Well, what does it take to
You need to
make
pull,
it
you
shoot?
need to cock the camera and pull the trigger.
So can I ask a funny question? I'm sorry to be so superficial, but does he have purple hair, or is it just the light? Does he have like a blue tint to his hair or like purple tint to his hair? or is it just the light? I don't know if I'm seeing things.
Do you know this gun that you have in front of you will fire without a pull of the trigger?
Actually, this gun cannot fire because from what I see is missing some parts. So,
Okay, I'm talking about when it was first
oh, sure, of
manufactured.
course.
Does it fire? Would it fire without a pull of the trigger?
No,
Why not?
because the mechanic, the design of the hammer and the trigger has been designed since Samuel Colt made this gun to work in that way.
And can you explain under
So you don't see a bit of blue in his hair? So am I imagining things?
what circumstances it will only fire?
Well, when you cock the hammer, the
I don't know, maybe because you guys aren't looking at it on a big screen. Seems pretty obvious. Yeah, like blue or purple, right? Yeah, he's Italian.
trigger will engage the firing knock position. That is the farthest one, so the last position of the hammer. And if you want to release the hammer, you need to pull the trigger. The trigger is just a shear that locks the hammer in that position. And if you want to do that, you need to pull the trigger.
Okay. Now, is there also a manufacturer's warning about whether or not the firing pin should be sitting on a primer?
Well, actually, it's not just a manufacturer, it's a standard rule between shooter when you carry your gun, in this particular gun, to load just only 5 ammo and not 6.
Why is that?
For safety reason. So you will know that you will not, if eventually the gun falls down, nothing happens.
What could happen if the gun falls down and the primer's...
Most of the time, nothing, because the hammer is against the frame. And so if you hit the round, the primer will not shoot the primer. So it's just a safety rule that has been taught to every kind of shooter. So I've been a shooter for myself, and that's what they told me to do. So load 5 rounds on the cylinder instead of 6.
So I'm going to be reductionist, and maybe I'm oversimplifying, but tell me I'm wrong when I say this. Yes or no? In terms of the law, in terms of this case, isn't the bottom line with this case one thing? And the one thing is, did Alec Baldwin pull the trigger or not? That's all it is. One thing. And it is something that could be decided during one morning session of trial. In other words, you don't even need 9 days or 8 days. You arguably need maybe 1 hour. And the 1 hour is basically, Alec Baldwin, what is your defense? Oh, I didn't pull the trigger. Is it possible for this firearm to pull its own trigger? You have the manufacturer saying no. Maybe you have some weapons experts as well also saying no. That's it. There's your argument. And you can have the defense going on as much as they want about whatever they want to go on, but that's the bottom line. Basically, that Baldwin wasn't required. He wasn't even acting a scene. It was a rehearsal. And so even in the scene that he was rehearsing, he wasn't required to pull the trigger. And so if he wasn't required to pull the trigger, how did the gun discharge? So the one thing is, did the gun just willy-nilly discharge? Why didn't it discharge at any other point? When it was lying somewhere, when it was in his holster, when it was in his hand but not pointing to anyone? I mean, when does a gun typically discharge in terms of a murderer murdering someone or an actor acting something? Well, when they point to the gun at someone, right? In other words, when you are, it's another way of saying it is, when does a vehicle typically turn on? Well, after someone has put on their safety belt and they're ready to go somewhere. And put it another way, does a vehicle turn on just no one's sitting in the vehicle and it turns on? or someone sitting in the vehicle and like one foot still out the door and the vehicle turns on. No, the vehicle turned itself on. It's very strange that the firearm discharges exactly when it's pointing at somebody in someone's hand, and that is exactly the thing that what they'd spoken about before that scene was they wanted this verisimilitude. They wanted this authentic moment where it's going to look so real. And isn't part of the whole reality the climax of that reality where you pull the trigger and you shoot? Isn't that the point of the whole thing? It's like the whole thing where you are shooting a movie where we're going to show the bullets in the chamber, and we're going to have a very real looking firearm and a very real looking cowboy and a very real looking church and a very real looking western. Well, what is the climax of that thing? It's not just all of that and then you don't pull the trigger. It's pulling the trigger at the end. It's a shot going off. That's the climax. That's the thing everyone's there to do. People go to watch cowboy movies to see bullets flying and people getting killed. And so in this rehearsal, are you going to stop yourself from pulling the trigger? That's what you're there for, right? And so I really don't understand why you needed to have a longer prosecution than just half a morning session where you say yes or no, did he pull the trigger? And then you have a couple of experts saying, well, the gun can't fire itself. That's the end. That's the end of the prosecution. And the jury then decide whether they accept that or not. It's in the jury's hands. And if the defense want to spend a week dealing with the other nonsense, let them deal with the other nonsense. Let's blame Seth Kenney, and the state can say, no further questions. We've got nothing to say about that. That's irrelevant or whatever, right? And we've made our case. In other words, you could have the prosecution lead their case literally in opening statements, and then literally in about half an hour after that, done. We're done. We've made our case. That's it. And so now we are getting caught up in these knots and all of this other intrigue, and the prosecution are getting caught up in it as well. And the same thing happened in the Karen Reed trial. All of this like extensive cross-examination. Present your case. It's as simple as this happened, and then you're done. Got nothing else to say. And it ended up being this long prosecution where the prosecution were basically indulging the defense case, and the defense only called 2 or 3 witnesses. So what I learned from that is it's a very simple case. Keep it simple, keep it short, and that way you disarm the defense, which is trying to confuse. The defense can only confuse, muddle, and so on with a lot to confuse and muddle. If you make the case concise and short, there's nothing to confuse and muddle. Do you follow? So I'm just saying, from a legal strategy perspective, aren't the prosecution totally falling for the sort of endless rabbit hole strategy of the defense? They should be confident in their case. They shouldn't be allowed to be distracted in the way they are. And who knows, maybe this latest motion to dismiss is going to succeed. And then if they had done this on day one and just presented the simple, obvious aspect and then stopped there, what can the defense then do after that? Because I don't think they really want to present a defense case. What are the defense going to do after that? That is going to catch the defense totally unawares. Like you say, well, we're planning on calling 60 witnesses and you only call 3. And then you say, the prosecution rests. The defense are going to be like, oh crap. Right? Anyway, I'm just saying it's something to consider. Something to consider. What is the evidence? What is the case? What's the bottom line? End of story. Quite interesting, right? Quite an interesting way of thinking about it. I mean, Alec Baldwin himself, his defense is, I didn't pull the trigger. Okay, so the prosecution is, you did pull the trigger, and this is how we make our case, and that's the end of the story. and it doesn't need to go on for hours and days. It can go on. I mean, how long is this clip that you're seeing on screen right now? It's 8 minutes. 8 minutes. And you can maybe have an armorer and some other weapons expert basically saying the same thing. And then there's another thing I would do, right? And you might say it's sarcastic or whatever, but I would say, can we have someone present a firearm in court firing itself? Can someone come into court and show a firearm just fire itself? And let's put a firearm like on a pillow or a cushion or a chair, and just fire yourself. Like just is there some way we can get this firearm to just fire itself? Like, can we just make the firearm fire itself? Because that is what we're talking about. The firearm fired itself. So is there some way we can actually get that to happen, right? And I think you would say it's very, very, very difficult for that. Maybe you could heat it up. Maybe you could throw golf balls at it or something. But another option is if you have a child or some kind of animal or a bunch of people like throwing the gun like over a volleyball net or something like that, at some point it's going to fire itself. In other words, with a lot of hands clutching at it, the firearm's going to get triggered and fire itself. That's a way a firearm can fire itself, is when a finger touches the trigger. Nobody meant to fire it, but it actually was fired. And you might think that that's silly, but that's exactly what we're dealing with here. That is exactly what we're dealing with here. So I'm not going to take it further than we're not going to spend any more time on this. Let's just see where we are with today's session. Is it still going on? Okay, it's not this one. Thanks a lot, Sarah. Appreciate that. Let's just see where we are with this briefly.
In fact, when you went to...
And that let's just deal with this wrapping up.
Do you want me to
Sarah?
do you want to leave it here?
I just want to see who was called in here. Lieutenant Brian Brandle for the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
The witness that was in the precinct told you he was a retired police officer, correct?
Yes.
He offered to make a statement multiple times, correct?
Yes.
Told you he was a witness multiple times, correct?
He did mention that.
Yeah. Told you he had evidence multiple times?
He did call it evidence, yes, but we had to confirm that it is in fact evidence, which is why I relayed to Detective Hancock that she needed to conduct an interview with him.
And what did Detective Hancock say on the phone? Tell me everything about that conversation.
They were still at the trial, and that she would follow up with him and the evidence as well.
And that would have really messed up the trial, right? If they had taken that evidence and vouched it and let anybody know, right?
I'm sorry, rephrase that?
That would have messed up the trial, right?
I don't believe it was used in the trial because it was never collected on our investigation.
And when Ms. Popple comes into the room, or when your camera comes into the room, she says, I've dealt with this case a lot, right?
Yes.
And Teskey says, you're the person.
Well, the judge didn't overrule that because I don't think it was ever the strategy of the prosecution. But you're right, she did let the defense take over. And now look where they are.
Perfect person, right?
Yes.
And it was obvious from the conversation that Ms. Popple knew who Joe Swanson was, who Seth Kenney was, right?
Yeah, she was familiar with them.
Yeah. And that interview of him continued, correct?
I believe he was speaking on his own accord. We weren't conducting an interview. He was just there to turn in the evidence that he claimed he had.
Oh,
Another, I think, really good practical demonstration would be if you said, you said, okay, what if we brought in someone, right, an actor, and they're going to do exactly what Alec Baldwin did. They're going to come in, and someone's going to say cold gun, and they're going to just practice draws because there were 12 people in the church. There are how many people in the courtroom? Is it okay if I just practice these draws? And I'm an actor. I don't have to check the firearm. Someone else has done it. Courtroom, do you mind if I do that? I'm just going to practice these draws. There could be a live round in there. I don't know, but it was someone else's job to do it. But even though there's a packed courtroom in front of me, do you mind if I just practice these draws? And, I might just decide to pull the trigger, or the firearm might decide to fire itself. Are you guys okay with that? But it's not my job to check. Are you guys okay with that? I'm gonna just practice a couple of draws. I just want to show you what Alec Baldwin did, but I'm not going to check the firearm myself because someone else did. Is that fine? I've made my case. How do you feel inside that courtroom with that kind of attitude? How do you feel about that? Do you feel that like that's safe? Do you feel like that's fair? Do you feel like somebody's saying, I will not check. I will not put your safety. I'm not going to make your safety a priority. It's not my job. It's not my job to make your safety a priority. I've got a firearm in my hand, and I'm not going to do anything to concern myself with your safety. There are 12 people around me in this room. I'm the one that's playing around with a firearm. I'm not going to do anything to check the firearm. I have an absolute right not to check the firearm. And like I say, you kind of role play that in the courtroom. How does that sit with you, jury? Do you mind if I do these cross draws in front of the jury? I just want to show you what Alec Baldwin was doing, but I'm not going to check the firearm. I don't have to. It's not my job. I've just made the case. I didn't have to spend a week doing it. It's common fucking sense. And so being caught up in all of this bullshit is playing to that whole thing of distract, delay, obfuscate. It's totally unnecessary. You don't need this long thing.
that's not that. So that's your testimony, sir. That if law enforcement is sitting with the witness, and the witness is giving information, and law enforcement's asking questions, and the witness continues to give information, that's not an interview?
Law enforcement wasn't asking questions. I was our crime scene tech.
No, not a single question was asked in that entire body cam?
I don't believe that I asked a question pertaining to the case, other than believing it was evidence that was already part of the Hannah Reed case, and there was already a chain of custody until after he began disclosing where the evidence came from. That's when I learned that it wasn't actually part of that
Yeah, I mean, when he was brought up, he walked out of court. When he was brought up, he walked out. It's like, how dare you put me on trial for this?
investigation, or it wasn't collected by our agency. It wasn't our actual evidence that was collected.
Right, and I don't have all of your police reports for all of your cases every time you get evidence, right? But fair to say sometimes evidence is developed by people coming into the precinct and turning in evidence?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And you write in your report, it should be noted that this is not actual evidence. That's what you write in your report.
I believe pertaining to our initial investigation.
It should be noted that this is not actual evidence from the death investigation collected by SFSO detectives. That's what you wrote, right?
Correct, and it wasn't collected by our detectives for the investigation. The initial investigation.
I don't understand that. Can you explain that to me?
So the evidence that was brought, I was indicating because we didn't know if it was tied to the investigation. And Detective Hancock asked that we tie it to a separate case number until further investigation could be completed. So I didn't want to someone or anyone to
Okay, so again, I'm just sharing my legal knowledge, my legal background. I find this so hypocritical. So what he's saying is someone comes 3 years later, after basically during or after a trial, walks into the police station and says, I've got this round, it should be added as evidence. If you don't add it as evidence, then let's cancel the case against Alec Baldwin or something like that. But here's the part that's really crazy. In the Amanda Knox case, there was a piece of a bra clasp that had been cut off Meredith Kurtz's bra that was under like a mattress, right? And it was kind of got lost in the crime scene. It was part of the crime scene, but it kind of got lost. And then I think something like, I don't know what the exact amount is, might be 19 days or so many weeks. The police recovered this piece of bra clasp, right? And because of that length of time that went by, this is something they found at the crime scene. This is something that was part of the victim. It was cut off her bra, right? And they basically used that length of time, a couple of days, maybe 3 weeks or whatever it was, to basically acquit, to say that gives enough doubt to acquit the person because it could have been contaminated. And they actually found Raffaele Celeste's DNA on that bra clasp. Like, what on earth is Raffaele Celeste doing in Meredith Kurtz's room? Now, what I'm trying to get at is, you have critical evidence, the bra clasp and the DNA in the crime scene, but because it took a certain length of time, because a certain length of time went by, that now gives you a license to throw the whole case out. Now you've got the opposite. 3 years go by, someone comes along and says, oh, I've got this round, what do you think of it? Oh, now we can dismiss the whole case because you didn't follow procedure. It's the inversion of that where you say, this round is absolutely part of the evidence. It's indisputable. Let's throw in the towel on this entire case. I'm just saying it's a kind of hypocrisy of how the law works in a way. How the whole reasonable doubt thing favors the defense, and it certainly does favor the defense.
to assume that
Are you following my argument, or are you not really following it? Because I think it's really an incredible kind of inversion of how the law can be basically toyed with in that sense.
it was actually evidence that we collected tied to this investigation.
And so that was at the direction of Detective Hancock?
No, that I wrote that on my own accord.
Well, you may have written that sentence on your own accord, but I think as you just testified, Detective Hancock, who was at the courthouse with Ms. Morrissey at the time, directed you to put it under a different identification number, correct?
Correct, pending further investigation.
Okay. You were involved, actually, you're copied on some emails with evidence.
So that is really the smoking gun, as it were, from the defense, is that Kerry directed the investigator to put that thing under a different name. And now they're saying it was buried, it was mischievous, improper, all of those things. That's really the trump card of the defense.
Evidence viewing in this case.
I believe so, yes.
Right. You have no reason to believe that law enforcement ever showed this evidence to the defense, correct?
Correct.
I have nothing further for this witness.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, this witness is excused. Next witness?
I don't think I have any other witnesses.
All
I'm
right.
happy to provide information myself.
All right, we're going to take a bathroom break, and we'll be back in 3:30, okay? Or
What all of the evidence indicated.
So it looks like she's on the stand now. Just go back a little. Not that much. Well, I really need to get off. I'm tired. I want to go to bed, but let's just do this quickly.
We're back on the record.
The court indicated that you wanted me under oath, and I'm happy to do that. Where would you like me?
Well, okay, so just clear, you're a witness, okay? So you can say oath or whatever, but are you calling yourself as a witness? Or do you want Mr. Spiro to call you as a witness?
It doesn't matter to me. How do you want to do it?
I don't think it's necessary, frankly, for this evidentiary record for me to call Ms. Morrissey. I know what happened and the court knows what happened. I don't think we need anything further.
Okay, do you want to call yourself as a witness? No, well, just a minute. So he's willing, as I understand it, to rest now. Okay? Now, you don't have to say anything.
Can you believe how freaking chaotic this court is? The prosecutor's calling herself as a witness. The defense is saying, I don't really want you. And the judge is saying, are you sure you want to do this? It's like, it's unbelievably chaotic. It's a mess.
Anything under oath if you don't want to.
No, I'm happy to.
Okay, so not only happy to, you know, I don't, it doesn't matter to me whether you call yourself as a witness. It doesn't matter to the defense whether you call yourself as a witness. So if you're calling yourself as a witness, there's no one here that's requiring you to be called as a witness.
The information, everything that happened in this regard, especially as it pertains to me, needs to come out in the public.
All right, so you're calling yourself as a witness.
And I am, and it was my understanding that the court indicated to me previously that you wanted me to testify. I understand you've now changed your mind. I think it's a good idea if I do it. Where would you?
Do you see how there's real unhappiness between the prosecutor and the judge? And I must say, I don't blame her. She's literally having the judge basically go, I wonder whether we should toss this case out. The defense has been here like one day, and I don't know whether there's really a case against Alec Baldwin. I would be pretty freaking pissed off myself. And she's like, okay, well, I'll put myself on the stand, you know.
Would you like me? Okay. Do you want me here at the podium?
No, on the witness.
Okay, sure.
All right, Ms. Morrissey voluntarily calling herself as a witness without any requirement by the court to do so, or Mr. Spiro asking her to. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, go ahead.
During my investigation of this case and my review of the evidence in this case, I came to understand that there was a large batch of live ammunition that was in the possession of Thel Reed, Hannah Gutierrez's father. I also understood from all of the evidence and testimony that a portion of that batch of ammunition that belonged to Thel Reed was taken by Thel Reed and Seth Kenney to the 1883 cowboy training camp. When that was over, leftover ammunition was taken back to PDQ props. Seth Kenney took some of the ammunition from that container that he had brought back from Texas.
Now, I must say, I find this riveting, and Alec Baldwin's not even looking at her. He's not even looking at her.
And turned it in to the sheriff's department. And it appeared to me that he did it to try to exonerate himself. They took it from Mr. Kenney and they tagged it into evidence under the Rust case. Law enforcement then executed a search warrant at PDQ Props, and they took the entire container. And I will say that I do agree, as I recall, although I don't have it in front of me, I do agree that The search warrant didn't really require law enforcement to take everything, but it was my understanding that Mr. Kenney gave them everything so that they would have it and could tag it into evidence. Portions of that ammunition were then sent to the FBI for testing so that they could be compared to the live rounds that were found on the set of Rust. The FBI testing demonstrated that the live rounds that were taken from PDQ props that were originally in Texas did not match the live rounds on the set of Rust. And that's testimony that we heard during the Gutierrez trial. So what ended up happening was Mr. Bowles, Ms. Gutierrez's lawyer, put Mr. Teskey on a witness list and was intending to call him as a witness to the Gutierrez trial. I conducted a pretrial interview of Mr. Teskey, and I want to back up. I did at this point have some understanding that Mr. Teskey had had contact with law enforcement regarding these rounds that he still had in Arizona. So these are rounds that never left Arizona. They were always in the possession of Thel Reed and Troy Teskey. They never went to Texas. They never came to New Mexico. That's what all of the evidence indicated. So I understood that Detective Hancock had communication with Mr. Teskey about trying to get those rounds, and Detective Hancock was unable to get those rounds from Mr. Teskey. I did not find that particularly concerning because those rounds had never left Arizona. The filming of Rust was in the state of New Mexico. And the rounds that were taken from PDQ went from Arizona to Texas to Albuquerque. So ammunition that is in the state of Arizona that has never left Arizona did not strike me that it had significant evidentiary value. Then, and I will say, I believe I actually saw a photo of it. At that point in time, I was able to look at the ammunition myself, and it was visibly dissimilar than the rounds from the set of Rust. We then cut to November of 2023. Mr. Bowles has put Mr. Teskey on a witness list for the Hannah Gutierrez case. We conducted a pretrial interview with Mr. Teskey on November 2nd of 2023. At that point in time, he brought up that he was still in possession of these live rounds that were Thel Reed's live rounds that had never left the state of Arizona. I then, when he started, I think he indicated during the pretrial interview that they were from the same batch that was sourced from Joe Swanson. And I then said, we should get those from you. I had a conversation with Detective Hancock after that pretrial interview.
Well, now Baldwin is paying careful attention. I wonder whether the lawyer is going to cross-examine the prosecutor
About how we could get the rounds from Mr. Teskey, and we were trying to figure out if we could send a local law enforcement agency.
Just think about what's going on here is you've got Alec Baldwin on trial, and right now you've got the prosecutor basically almost in a desperate bid putting herself on the stand. That's how things have devolved by day 3 of this trial. It's pretty freaking incredible. And I don't mean that in a good way.
To pick them up. I was then decided that I needed to figure out if that was necessary since they had never left Arizona. And up to that point, it was my impression that they did not match the live rounds from the set of rust. I then, as I recall, reached out to Mr. Bowles. He and I had a conversation about whether or not the rounds should be tested by the FBI. And I was still trying to figure out if I could get the rounds from Arizona to New Mexico. So I
also want to draw an analogy to, this is a trial about rust, right? The production. The production has been accused of being chaotic and messy and cutting corners, and Baldwin basically kind of coming in and basically running the show, but also keeping everyone on their toes. Isn't that exactly what's happening in this courtroom? Isn't this courtroom kind of an analogy for the rust set?
I asked Mr. Bowles to please send me a photograph of the rounds from Troy.
Have you ever seen such a fucked up courtroom, such a fucked up trial, ever?
Teskey, so that I could see with my eyes whether they were even remotely similar. If they were similar, I could go through the steps of obtaining the ammunition, connecting probably with local law enforcement, having a local law enforcement agency go to Mr. Teskey's residence and collect them. I didn't want to do that if they didn't look anything like the rounds from the set of rust, because all 6 rounds from the set of rust are identical to each other. So when I had this conversation with Mr. Bowles, he provided me the photograph that I showed this morning. And this is it was my understanding that this was a photograph from Troy Teskey. So Troy and I don't communicate. He's a defense witness. I can't communicate with a defense witness. So Mr. Bowles, as I recall, texted me this photo, and this is a photo that Mr. Teskey took at my request so that I could determine whether this ammunition was related in any way to the set of rust, because it never left the state of Arizona. So if it never left the state of Arizona, the only way that it is relevant to the rust investigation is if it has.
Check this guy's face here. I mean, that's how he looks is what I'm thinking. It's like, what the hell is going on here? She's also got that sort of look on her face.
Any similarity to the live rounds that were found on the set of rust, because we were at that point trying to figure out the source of the live rounds. When I received this photograph from Mr. Bowles, I could immediately tell that these are very dissimilar from the live rounds that were found on the set of rust. They have brass primers. So this is what was presented to the prosecution as the rounds that were in Mr. Teskey's possession. They have brass primers and not silver primers. One of them, the one on the left, appears to be a Starline brass casing, but they have truncated cone projectiles. We had seen ammunition that looked exactly like this, not exactly, but very, very similar. And that ammunition was the ammunition that was collected from the sheriff's department and went to the FBI for testing and was determined not to be similar in any way to the live rounds on the set of rust. So when I saw this photograph, I could see that it was not at all similar to the live rounds on the set of rust. And I decided not to take any steps to collect this ammunition because it was in Arizona, had never come to New Mexico, and didn't match the live rounds on the set of Rust. So what ends up happening is Mr. Teskey is called to New Mexico by Mr. Bowles to testify at the Gutierrez trial.
I don't think he did.
And you can hear on the video that the court heard Mr. Teskey say, the defense attorney, that's not me,
Oh, he did.
asked him to bring samples of that ammunition. According to Mr. Teskey, he brought the samples of the ammunition, showed them to the defense attorney, and the defense attorney said, I don't want those. I'm not going.
Look at the judge. She's not even looking at the prosecutor. It's almost like she's like, when's this going to be over? She's not even looking in her direction. She's sort of looking down, looking down.
Going to use those. And by the way, I'm not going to call you as a witness. So Mr. Teskey sat in court during the trial. And then at some point, contacted the deputies downstairs and said, I have this ammunition. So he tried to give it to the defense attorney, who's the person who asked him to bring it. The defense.
Do you think the judge is very happy? Just look at her. I don't know if you guys can see. Just look at her face. She's not even blinking. She, I think, is extremely pissed off and feels humiliated or whatever, feels not very happy.
The attorney said no.
Oh, there she did blink.
And he then tried to get a hold of Detective Hancock, who was not available because she was with me. So then he ends up going to the sheriff's.
The only thing that could get crazier than what it already is if the judge gets up and walks out.
Department, and he leaves the ammunition at the sheriff's department. I was contacted, I don't think it was the same day, but I'm not 100% sure. It's possible that it was, by Detective Hancock, and she indicated that Troy Teskey had dropped off ammunition at the sheriff's department. Because I had already asked for a photograph of it, I believed that that ammunition was going to look like the photograph that Mr. Bowles had sent me. Corporal Hancock indicated that she was going to tag them into evidence and she was going to create what she called a doc report. And I said, great, do that. I was not aware at that point in time that a doc report would not have the same case number as Rust. I was not aware at that point in time that it would not be linked to the Rust case number. I understood that he had dropped off ammunition that I believed to not look similar to the ammunition from the set of Rust. And I had no idea that it wasn't going to have the same case number. I want to show the court, though, when Mr. Teskey showed up to testify with the ammunition that Mr. Bowles told him to bring to the state of New Mexico, he was not called as a witness, and Mr. Bowles said, I'm not taking that ammunition from you. That's why. Because these are photographs from Hannah Gutierrez's cell phone extraction, and they show spot-on match for the live rounds found on the set of Rust. This is clearly the reason that Mr. Bowles said, you and your ammunition better get out of here, because it would not have hurt the case, the state's case against Hannah Gutierrez. It would have been the best evidence I could have hoped for. These look exactly like the ammunition, the actual ammunition that we have in evidence. And they do look like the 3 rounds that are in that envelope. So when Mr. Teskey couldn't get Mr. Bowles to take them because they were the best evidence against his client, he took them over to the sheriff's department. And when he dropped them at the sheriff's department, I was told that there was going to be a report. There was a report. I assumed they looked like these. And Detective Hancock indicated to me that because he dropped them off and he didn't wait for her, she was then going to try to follow up with him, take a statement from him, so that we could get some idea where they came from, what the relevance was, if there was any relevance at all. And he never returned her phone calls. And that's all of the information that I can give the court, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Looks like there will be a few questions.
May I ask a few questions, Your Honor? When you took over this case, the investigator handling the case, Mr. Schilling, left the case, correct?
At my request, yes.
The paralegal that was handling this case with you left the case, Mr. Tad?
At my request, yes.
Well, the first prosecutor that was working with you on this case, you selected, correct?
I did.
And he resigned too?
I wouldn't say that he resigned, no.
Okay. He didn't stay on the case for the Alec Baldwin trial, correct?
No, and he indicated that that was because he represented a labor union that's a national labor union, and he was not expecting the trial to be set so quickly. He wasn't expecting it to be set in July. So when he realized that the trial was going to be set in July, he was going to be in collective bargaining agreements for his national labor union, and he wasn't going to be able to have enough time.
Erlinda Johnson, the next prosecutor selected, resigned from the case today,
She did.
based in part on the conduct we're here discussing, correct?
Well, I didn't know that Erlinda Johnson, the other prosecutors, resigned today.
I believe that Ms. Johnson Ms. Johnson didn't want my understanding is that she didn't agree with the decision to have a public hearing.
On July 1st in this matter, you served a certificate of compliance with 5501, correct?
I did.
And you've never turned over the report or any of the evidence that we're talking about here at this hearing, correct?
Let's take it one at a time. I did not turn over the report. I didn't have a copy of the report.
That is weird.
The rounds that were left at the sheriff's department by Troy Teskey, I have absolutely no reason to believe that they are relevant to the incident that took place on the set of Rust. These are rounds that were in the possession of Bell Reed and never left the state of Arizona.
You also did not allow the defense to view that evidence at any point during our request to review evidence in this case?
I had never seen it, and I didn't realize that it wasn't under the same case number because I'm not a law enforcement officer and I don't work at the sheriff's department. But you are right.
And you concede that they are Starline brass silver 45, right?
I can. And this is the best evidence against Hannah Gutierrez.
Yeah, you've said that a couple of times. Any favorable evidence you understand as a prosecutor has to be turned over to the defense, correct?
I do.
Any evidence that could be used as a defense to potentially be favorable has to be turned over to the defense.
Absolutely.
So the third Hague report that never got turned over to the defense, you understand that that's Brady evidence?
I did, yes.
Okay. And you also failed to turn that over in this case as well, correct?
And let me give you a full answer to your question. When the second Hague report came in, and I provided all of this to the defense, I sent it to the person who is managing the discovery server and asked them to upload it. It wasn't until I realized during pretrial interviews that it wasn't there that there was a problem with it. So I then attempted to figure out what the problem was.
Yeah, I must say, if the other prosecutor's gone, then I don't know. If it's up to the judge to dismiss this case, I think it's hanging on by a thread at this point.
And it was indicated to me that it appeared that the former paralegal who was working for the special prosecutor had removed it. So we then immediately provided it. Then during the pretrial interview of Mr. Haig, it was brought to my attention that the defense did not have the August 31st report that indicated that the gun functioned fine, perfectly fine, and that was provided immediately. I went back, I checked my email, I could see that I received it from Mr. Haig and failed to forward it on to be uploaded. And I provided it as soon as I was aware that you did not have it.
The fact that nobody at the Hannah Gutierrez retrial cross-examined Mr. Haig about the report didn't clue you into the fact that nobody had the report?
Actually, it didn't, and I'd like to address that. The reason that it didn't clue me in is because Hannah Gutierrez's defense was that the gun worked perfectly. The defense in Hannah Gutierrez was never interested in any evidence that there was an issue with the gun, because if there was an issue with the gun, it damaged her case. So what you could see, if you watched the trial or saw any of the transcripts, the defense actually brought in their own expert to say that the gun worked perfectly. So they had no interest in that information.
And actually, you elicited testimony from Mr. Haig at that trial that was inconsistent, at least partially inconsistent, as the court's aware, with his third report, correct?
Tell me what you're referring to and I'll answer your question.
Well, there was a whole hearing about this where you saw this and you saw me go back and forth with Mr. Haig for 25 minutes. So
I agree, but I need to know what you're talking about for me to answer your question.
Okay, if you can't answer the question, you can't answer the question. I'll move on.
I'm happy to, but
You say that the extent of the communications you have about the doc report, as you relay it to the court, is that all you said in response was, "Great, do that." That's your testimony?
yeah, I assumed that it was going to be tied to the same case number. So I said, great, do it, file a report.
No follow-up questions?
No, because I had a picture of the ammunition that didn't match the ammunition from the set of rust.
No concerns in your mind when you got the case file and you turned it over to us that it wasn't included?
Absolutely not. There's a terabyte of discovery. I didn't know whether this 2-page police report had been provided. And in addition to that, I had no reason to believe, and still have no reason to believe, that those rounds have anything to do with these cases.
As I asked you about Mr. Haig yesterday when Ms. Popple testified, you would agree with me that her testimony under oath was false?
What part of her testimony was false? And I'll answer.
That she said that these rounds don't look anything like the rounds on the set when you elicited that testimony.
I agree with you, and I didn't realize that there were rounds that looked like that.
It's okay. In any event, when the court, and you never tested those rounds either, correct?
Any of the rounds that came from Mr. Teskey? No, because they came in just a few months ago.
And the court asked you actually one question that I want to address, which is, the court said to you, well, what's interesting to me, to be quite honest, is that yesterday you didn't even want to do a written reply. You wanted to just give an oral response. And what you said to the court was, I never saw these, I've never seen these, and I never saw the report. I have absolutely never seen these until this morning. Do you remember saying that to the court?
With regard to the 3 Starline brass, with regard to the 3 cartridges that appeared to be similar to rust, yes.
Well,
I never saw them until today.
Again, can you believe that day 3 has been taken up with bickering, all of this nonsense? Unbelievable. Not a single witness has been called. I'm talking about in front of the jury. Hannah Gutierrez-Reed was supposed to testify today. Maybe she wouldn't have, but then maybe you would have had another witness. It's been a total, non-day, and who knows whether there'll be, the trial will resume tomorrow. Monday.
Well, but you said also, I never saw the report, right?
I never did.
Right, but don't you think, given your duty of candor to this court, that that's awfully misleading to not tell the court at that point that you knew about this when it occurred long ago?
That I knew about what?
You knew that Mr. Teskey had turned in this evidence, that you knew that the report would have existed because you just told this court that the doc report was okayed by you.
Sure.
Don't you think it was misleading to this court to not just say at that point, you know, just so you know, I know about this. I knew about this then. I was involved.
I did not intend to mislead the court. My understanding of what was dropped off at the sheriff's department is on this computer screen, and it looks absolutely nothing like the live rounds from the set of Rust.
The truth of this matter is you don't like Mr. Baldwin very much, do you?
You know, that is absolutely untrue. I actually really appreciate Mr. Baldwin's movies. I really appreciated the acting that he did on Saturday Night Live, and I really appreciate his politics.
You told one of the witnesses who disagreed with you during an interview that you thought Mr. Baldwin was a cocksucker.
I do not recall saying that. I know that that was something that Mr. Baldwin would say on the set of Rust. I don't recall saying that.
Do you deny that under oath?
Without having more information, I can tell you that I do not recall ever saying that. And if I did say it, I invite you to point it out to me.
You called him an arrogant prick to another witness.
To who? To what witness?
I'm asking you, did you call him an arrogant prick during a witness interview?
I don't believe I did. I don't recall.
Do you deny that?
Without knowing what you're talking about, all I can tell you is that I can't respond if I don't know what you're talking about.
And you said also to witnesses that you would teach him a lesson.
I never said to witnesses that I would teach him a lesson. Absolutely not. In fact, Mr. Spiro, I want to give a full response to your question. I made every effort in this case to resolve this case with your client in a very favorable way for him.
All right, I'm going to move to strike this. It's not responsive.
It is
Well, I don't
responsive.
want to talk about plea negotiations.
Yeah, and it's not responsive. So I have no further
All right,
questions.
do you have any follow-up testimony? All right,
I want to say I have no recollection of calling him any of those names. I have invited the defendant to tell me what he's talking about, and he has declined. I want the court to take notice of that.
thank you. You may step down.
Well, ended on a pretty sour note all
All right, any
round.
other witnesses?
No, Your Honor.
All right, argument, let's not, 15 minutes aside sufficient?
I don't even think that is necessary, frankly.
Do you want to make argument?
Further argument.
All
I
right,
don't think either side needs further argument on this point.
all right. So dismissal with prejudice is a very extreme sanction. And case law is very clear that because it's very extreme, I have to go through every single element and I have to make a very good record as to why I'm seeing what I'm seeing. So in order to establish a Brady violation, the defendant must show that the prosecution suppressed evidence, the evidence was favorable to the accused, and the evidence was material to the defense. So let's go through the elements. Suppression of evidence. The definition of suppression of elements, this is Case versus Hatch, is while the first element requires proof that the prosecution suppressed or withheld the evidence in question, it does not require a finding of bad faith or any other culpable state of mind on the part of the prosecutor. This prong is satisfied. The Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office and the prosecution failed to disclose the supplemental report to defense and provide defense an opportunity to inspect the rounds collected into evidence that Mr. Teskey gave. Is the evidence favorable to the accused? The second Brady element is whether the suppressed evidence was favorable to the accused, either as impeachment or exculpatory evidence. This prong is
Looks
satisfied.
like the case is going to be
The
dismissed.
suppressed evidence is favorable to the accused. It is impeachment evidence, has even been offered in this trial as impeachment evidence, and is potentially
People smiling and
exculpatory to the
nodding already.
defense. Critically, the exculpatory value cannot be analyzed at such a late juncture because of the non-disclosure. Is the evidence material? While post-trial discovery of evidence under Brady requires a reasonable probability that the result of the proceeding would have been different, discovery of evidence during trial requires an evaluation of whether the late tender has impeded the effective use of evidence in such a way that it impacts the fundamental fairness of the proceedings, and that is State versus Huerta Castro. This evidence is material. The late discovery of this evidence during trial has impeded the effective use of evidence in such a way that it has impacted the fundamental fairness of the proceedings. The defense is not in a position to test the state's theory as to the source of the live rounds that killed Ms. Hutchins. I'm also going to take a look at Harper, State versus Harper. The assessment of sanctions depends upon the extent of the government's culpability, weighed against the amount of prejudice to the state. Quoting Chenard. Let's go through culpability. Our case law generally provides that the refusal to comply with a district court's discovery order only rises to the level of exclusion or dismissal where the state's conduct is especially culpable, such as where evidence is unilaterally withheld by the state in bad faith, or all access to the evidence is precluded by state intransience. The state is highly culpable for its failure to provide this discovery to the defendant. The state unilaterally withheld a supplemental report. Santa Fe County Sheriff's Officer made the decision, and apparently also with the prosecutor, as pursuant to Hancock's testimony, that the evidence was of no evidentiary value and failed to connect the evidence to the instant case. The case agent, as well as pursuant to Hancock's testimony, Ms. Morrissey, was aware of the new evidence and yet did not make an effort to disclose it to defense. The state's willful withholding of this information was intentional and deliberate. If this conduct does not rise to the level of bad faith, it certainly comes so near to bad faith as to show signs of scorching. Prejudice. When discovery has been produced late, prejudice does not accrue unless the evidence is material and the disclosure is so late that it undermines the defendant's preparation for trial. The court concludes that this conduct is highly prejudicial to the defendant. The jury has been sworn, jeopardy has attached, and this disclosure during the course of trial is so late that it undermines the defendant's preparation for trial. There is no way for the court to right this wrong. Lesser sanctions under Harper. Trial courts possess broad discretionary authority to decide what sanction to impose when a discovery order is violated, State versus Lemire. The sanction of dismissal is the only warranted remedy. The jury has been sworn, jeopardy has attached, and a mistrial would not be based upon manifest necessity. Further, the sanction of dismissal.
Well, it looks like he's crying. She's smiling. She's smiling. This person is just gasping. This person is like stretching their eyeballs.
Was warranted in this case. The state has repeatedly made representations to defense and.
She's looking thrilled. She's smiling.
And to the court that they were compliant with all their discovery obligations. Despite their repeated representations, they have continued to fail to disclose critical evidence to the defendant. Brady and Harper are satisfied. Dismissal with prejudice is warranted. Court also has power, inherent power. Per State versus Lemire, where discovery violations inject needless delay into the proceedings, courts may impose meaningful sanctions to effectuate their inherent power and promote efficient judicial administration. The state's discovery violation has injected a needless, incurable delay into the instant jury trial. Dismissal with prejudice is warranted to ensure the integrity of the judicial system and the efficient administration of justice. The motion to dismiss with prejudice is granted. Now, with respect to the jury, I don't imagine you all want to return on Monday. I will take care of the jury.
Thank you.
We are in recess. I'm gonna.
Thank you all for your help. Stay well, okay?
I do wonder whether Hannah should be acquitted, if that's the next step, that Hannah is going to be acquitted, or her case dismissed as well. Because, I mean, think about it, these cases are tied together. Hannah's case dismissed, and then Hannah could actually sue for wrongful imprisonment, and she could actually get a couple, 10, 20, couple of $1,000 in restitution. That could definitely happen. I have to say, I'm not from America, but I have to say it's pretty disgusting. What I've seen here is pretty disgusting. I must say, my faith in the American legal system has definitely shifted downward a couple of notches, especially after the Karen Reed trial. Yeah, it's definitely depressing. It's very, very depressing. I couldn't help thinking when the prosecutor was on the stand, thinking she's all alone. She's like all alone on that seat. You could see the judge had completely written her off quite a while ago. Her colleague had walked out. It seemed like the only person who wanted to prosecute this case at the end was the prosecutor. Nobody else did. No one in the gallery, maybe someone in the gallery, but I saw a lot of people smiling. So someone said, so who pays for Alina's death? Answer, nobody. I guess the prosecutor. The prosecutor pays. It's the prosecutor's fault that Helena died. It's the investigator's fault that Helena died. It's the first responder's fault that Helena died. Not the person who held the gun, not the armorer, no one on the Rust set. The people who investigated the case, it's their fault. Yeah. Well, anyway, that's it, folks. So there won't be coverage of the Rust trial Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The case is over. Let's have a look at some of your comments. I wonder whether Carrie is crying. I would be if I was her. Yeah. She must feel humiliated, embarrassed, but also just very sad, very disappointed. There's no one there giving her any support. Look at that. Yeah, it's definitely, this is a shocking outcome, I must say. Looks like there's going to be a press conference as well. Let's look at some of your comments. Don't play with evidence.
Opportunity to inspect the rounds collected into evidence that Mr. Teskey gave. Is the evidence favorable to the accused?
Public
money
Okay,
that was
we
spent
should have
on all the
IFB
mistakes
now.
that we made along the way. And at the
John,
end of the day,
How they resigned and why.
Okay, well, I think that's it from my side. Wow. There you go. So look at, yeah, completely devastated. Earth says, I'm very proud of her. Shocking stuff. Yeah, she might. Yeah. Some of your comments. I don't really have much to say, except that. Sorry, that. Yeah. Well, it took 3 years for this case to go to trial, and Bolden was barely on trial for 1 day. Barely was on trial for 1 day. Remember, I said something like, why the defense trying so hard to avoid this case? In other words, trying to get the case dismissed, right? Well, what do you think? Anyway. Okay, guys. Well, yeah, that is the reality of this case. It is what it is, I guess. I must say it basically devolved into a catastrophe pretty quickly. But there you have it. At the end of the day, this whole trial is about the woman behind me. And if you think about it, how much was she brought up in this fiasco? It was all about rounds. It was all about casings. It was all about Seth Kenney. It was all about test key or whatever. How much of it was about Helena? Anyway, yeah, I definitely am upset. I definitely am upset. Guys, thanks those who have been here, and thanks for joining me. And yeah, I will be putting up 2 videos this weekend, one on Rex Heuermann and one on Patsy Ramsey. The one on Patsy Ramsey I think you're going to find really interesting. But that is it from my side. Take care. See you guys next time.